All right, hey guys, what is up? Hello, and welcome to the movie discussion Pocket Dimension, the dimension where time does not exist, and the only thing that matters is film. I'm Cole, joined by Jay, and we are back with 1978's The Driver, one we finally were able to give you a little bit of a heads up on last week when we did The Samouraï, because we always said how we wanted to talk about how The Driver, structurally and thematically in a lot of ways, it's almost kind of like a loose remake of The Samurai, just with a few details changed. And a few years ago, we did do the movie Drive, which in everything but name is more or less kind of a loose remake of this movie, with all the DNA that they share. The Driver's always been a big favorite of mine. I think it's one of the sort of overlooked movies of the 70s. You know, the 70s is known for so many like landmark, important movies. And I mean, I'm not saying this is on the same level as them, because, you know, you've got stuff like The Godfather, Star Wars, Alien, The Exorcist, you know, it goes Close Encounters, you know, it's probably not in the same echelon, no. But I mean, people talk about something like, for instance, in crime, like a big one is The French Connection. I think this is on the same like level as The French Connection. I really do. I know it's a simpler, shorter movie. There's less going on in it. But I don't know. I've always thought The French Connection was a tiny bit overrated, although I like it. And of course, that movie was known for a long car chase. Car chases have become sort of more and more important as the decade went on. So here's a movie that's kind of all about that. And this, of course, is from director Walter Hill, who's one of my favorite directors, who, if you've been watching the show, especially recently, I've talked a little bit about him and his career because I've always really enjoyed him. And this is one of the main reasons. I kind of go back and forth. He made this movie and The Warriors kind of at the same time. And those are my two favorite movies by him, although I like a lot of his other stuff too. But The Driver is one of those movies too that did not make much of an impact at the time, did not do anything at the U.S. box office. It did somewhat better overseas, but anyway, the movie really didn't make any profit. So even though you couldn't say it was a bomb, it also didn't do anything. So it more or less broke even, and which is too bad. But it's been sort of reassessed as time goes by, especially for being super influential, like we said, most notably with somebody like Quentin Tarantino, who's mentioned it and homaged it in some of his movies. Drive, of course, being the most direct, because Drive is practically like a 2011 remake. And in the same vein of sort of like car chase movies, you've got Baby Driver from a few years ago, which is one of my favorite movies of recent years, which obviously owes an awful lot to this movie too. So Nicholas Winding Refn, Edgar Wright, Quentin Tarantino, and then even people like, say, Michael Mann, James Cameron. You can see they've got a little bit of that influence from this movie. So I think this movie's impact is sometimes understated, because I don't think it's a movie a lot of people have seen, and there's reasons for it. They even talk about, like, for instance, the casting of Ryan O'Neal. Even though he was a big name in the 70s, this was sort of going against type for him at the time. This was not the kind of role he'd done, and it was well known that the studio wanted somebody like a Clint Eastwood. And, you know, originally they wanted Hill and company wanted Steve McQueen. You can understand why. And McQueen turned it down. I'm kind of glad he did, because, you know, he'd sort of already done movies like that with Bullet and stuff like that. And apparently the studio, this was not Hill's idea, had even turned to Charles Bronson, who had worked with Hill for a previous movie from a couple of years ago. Can't remember his title. All of a sudden it'll come back to me. And Bronson turned it down because he was upset, because I guess his own wife had been in that movie and he didn't like how Hill did her part or something like that. I don't know. But Hill said he was glad that he didn't wind up taking it anyway, because he did not want him for the role. So yeah, Ryan O'Neal was a big star, but not exactly what maybe was expected. Bruce Dern in a main role. Bruce Dern's always been like a supporting actor, right? Pretty much his whole story of his career, supporting actor. Although he does have a leading role in the movie that we're eventually going to do on this show.
I know what you're going to say.
I was going to say Silent Running. Speaking of like important 70s movies, is a movie that Jay and I have both always really liked. So someday we are going to do Silent Running, which actually is a rare starring role for Bruce Dern. And we were talking before the show about how just a couple years ago he actually had at least a leading role in a movie called Nebraska. Neither of us have seen that. Yes, thank you, Sean. Hard Times is the movie with Bronson. That's right. Which I have not seen. Although I finally, Southern Cover was the one I hadn't seen for many years. I finally saw that like about a month ago. It's okay. I don't love it. I like it okay. I thought, you know, it's good enough for what it is. It reminds me of a lot of different stuff. Yeah? I mean, yeah, I'll get to it.
He had a run there, Walter Hill, just knocking him out of the park.
Absolutely. And even some of the lesser ones, like I said, I actually about 6 months ago I bought like a crazy special edition of the movie Streets of Fire, which is more or less kind of a failure and did not do well during that run. But I really like it anyway. I always think of it sort of as a noble failure because I respect what he was trying to do with it, and I still think has some really great aspects. Anyway, that's 84, I think. But yeah, that a run from basically the mid 70s right up to about 1990. He did all sorts of, and he was one of those directors that was known for being really competent about directing like big action sequences and stuff. And this movie is kind of one of the starts of that. Of course, having these fairly elaborate car chase scenes. We were doing a live when we did our last live commentary when we did the raid part 2. Yeah, I finally did, but that's a good thing to say to viewers in general. Because yeah, I hadn't for years and years, so I finally did see Southern Cover. But anyway, we were doing the raid part 2. I kind of was trying to make a point, and then I trailed off. I got distracted, talked about something else. But I was just saying how you had kind of like a trifecta of elements for an action movie as far as like the action elements, and it's pretty simple. Like one is what I consider hand-to-hand fighting, which isn't always unarmed. It just means like either fighting like actually unarmed, or maybe using like weapons like knives and swords and stuff like that. The other is gunfighting, and then the third is any sort of chase and stuff with vehicles. So I always think those are like the big things you center all action movies around, more or less. And sometimes movies can even combine the two of those elements or 3 of those elements to great effect. So this movie, obviously being about a getaway driver, it's all about car chases, which had been pretty en vogue in the 70s, and of course got going with the Steve McQueen Bullet from the end from the late 60s there. But I feel like this movie, it does a great job of really keeping things kind of grounded. The stuff is spectacular, but I don't think there's anything in there that like couldn't happen.
No,
it's
totally.
not. We don't see anything in there where the like the laws of physics are actually being defied, or anything like that. I mean,
it's all real stunts. So
it's all real stunts. Yeah. So some really great stunt driving by some very talented stunt drivers.
Absolutely.
And some of those moves have been used in movies, like we said. You can see it in a couple Quentin Tarantino movies. There's a part in Pulp Fiction where when he's I think it's John Travolta's character is driving. Is it when he's driving when she's OD'd? Is he driving her at some point or something like that after she's OD'd? Maybe I'm mixing it up. But there's a part where somebody is like racing and they just sort of like do a big like spin out and like turn, like a fast turn on the road.
I'm sorry, what were you talking about this film?
Well, I'm saying Pulp Fiction has a moment where they do like this spin out thing. And it's pretty much directly taken from what he does in the very first car chase sequence in this movie.
Travolta. Right?
It is Travolta. Yeah, okay. So it's Travolta after what's her name ODs, right? He's trying to get her somewhere. Anyway, so there's that. There's also a line in the Kill Bill films about how she's like the cowgirl that ain't never been caught, which is how Bruce Dern refers to the driver Ryan O'Neal as like the cowboy that ain't never been caught. Yeah, I really like Bruce Dern. I think he makes a really good what's the word? A really good contrast for the driver, because you've got a character, because again we're going to talk about a character who doesn't talk much, and so he's kind of like contrasted against this cop that likes to talk quite a bit, which I think works pretty well. And I had it here. Yeah, the driver says 350 words in this movie, which
I can't believe it's that many.
Which is very little, yeah. I mean, it's more than, say, the Terminator says in Terminator, but still, he's not a robot, he's a human being. But we talked a little about the style that the Samouraï had, and that's very much carried forward here. And I think it's even brought up a notch by the fact that now the characters don't even have names.
Mm-hmm.
There's the driver, the detective, the female character played by Isabel Adegani is the player, and then there's several others too. There's glasses and teeth, and they all have names like that. And also something I think a lot of people don't notice, and I usually don't notice because I'm bad at this, is like none of the characters ever change clothes. The characters all wear one outfit throughout the events of the movie, which is kind of weird because the movie takes place over several days. It's not like it's just one day. So nobody ever changes clothes in this movie. Every time you see a character, they're wearing the exact same clothes they wore throughout the whole movie. which again was obviously a deliberate stylistic choice, maybe just to help, I don't know, hammer home their identities, considering they aren't actually given names.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you were mentioning before Isabel Adjani. We've covered her before because she was in a movie a couple years after this called Possession from 1981. That wasn't not an American film though. Actually, she's a French actress, and this movie was sort of her foray into Hollywood. And what's funny is she had done a movie a few years earlier. I don't remember what it was called here. Actually, it was a Francois Truffaut movie. Speaking of the people that we've talked about recently on the show, she'd done a Francois Truffaut movie. What the hell is it called? Oh, The Story of Adele H, which came out in '75, and that was like a big deal in that, like, it was one of those movies. It was a French movie, but it made waves over here to the point that she became in demand for Hollywood movies. And this is the movie she picked because she liked the script and thought it was good. And she said that it kind of halted any momentum that she had overseas after this. Really was like because the movie didn't do well, and that that kind of kept her from having a more successful career in Hollywood. And then she kind of went back to doing various European films like the aforementioned Possession. It's too bad. I like her in the role. I mean, she's very attractive, certainly. She's got sort of big eyes and sort of pouty lips, which I like a lot. And I don't know, the role just sort of calls for having a certain amount of attitude, which I think she pulls off more or less.
Sure.
I mean, this is not exactly a character-driven movie. The characters are more sort of archetypes than perhaps particularly like deep characters. I don't think that's a bad thing. Apparently, in one of his review for this, what did Roger Ebert? I had a quote there where Roger Ebert said something like about how that doesn't work for it or something like that. Roger Ebert. He gave it 2.5 stars out of 4, writing, "It's a movie about people who are not real because they are symbols, and it's a damned good thing they are great chase scenes, or the movie would sink altogether." I mean, I guess that's true, but I don't think that means it's bad. Because I mean, yeah, obviously the movie's all set around these chase scenes. It's true, if they weren't good, the movie would sink. But I don't think that means that the fact that the characters are more symbols or archetypes is necessarily to its detriment. Because I just don't, this movie's not a deep character study. It's not about relationships and emotions, really, right? It's just sort of like a cause and effect movie with some criminal underground stuff going on, underworld.
I mean, it's all intentional.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's no Valley of the Dolls or anything. But
yeah.
Ebert's such a genius.
I think that's like the kind of hole that people go down a lot whenever they criticize almost anything. Not even just like a movie. Even sometimes I think this, like when people are criticizing, say, like a hockey player or something like that. We like to talk about what they're not. Like, let's not focus on the things they're not. Let's focus on, what they are, what they actually bring. And I think it's kind of silly to criticize this movie for, perhaps not being a stirring drama. Because that's not the movie, So, yeah, I think that's kind of a silly thing to do, is focus on something like that.
So, did they kind of attribute the failure of this at the box office to the starring role of Ryan O'Neal?
That's what the main thing I could find, which I think is a little unfair. Because, I mean, I think he does, even if he is cast against type, he does really well. Because he comes off, he's really cool and aloof, I think it works really well.
It's probably my favorite of his films that I've seen.
I mean, first of all, Clint Eastwood was already too old. Because the driver's supposed to be somewhat young and cocky, right? He should be like probably under 30 or around 30, So Clint Eastwood always has this air of being a tough guy and stuff anyway. Like, it would just be more of a cliche and anything. It works a lot better. Luc Besson. He's a guy we could talk about sometime. What an interesting career he's had. Speaking of French directors. But there I go, getting off track.
I mean, even if Charles Bronson had been in this film, I mean, would that have made it a box office success? I know Bronson was a pretty big guy at that time, but
yeah. I mean, Bronson could obviously carry off the whole aloof tough guy thing, but again, I think he's too intense.
He would have been too old too.
And also too old, right? Like the idea, I think you're really throwing off the balance here if he's an older guy. I think part of the character is that he's sort of a young, and it's in all three movies we talked about, whether it's The Samurai or Drive. These are all young guys. Yeah. And it would really throw off and change the dynamic of the movie if he was like, say, like 40 or something, or upwards of that. Because I think the whole idea of the driver is like, he's young, but his talent has elevated him anyway, right? Like, it's not that he has tons of experience, has been around forever. It's just he's so good. Yeah. So that probably people taking him on for jobs would even think, oh, he's a little young for this job. It's like, no, trust him. You know, he knows what he's doing. I think they talk about that in Baby Driver, because in it, he's just like a kid. He's like 18 in Baby Driver. And they say, don't worry about him. He might be a kid, but he can drive.
Right. That's very much inspired by this film, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least that aspect of that film. I know they really flesh out the characters a lot more than.
I mean, any movie that's going to focus on a getaway driver is going to owe something to the driver, because it's really it's really the first movie I can think of where a getaway driver is a main character. That doesn't mean you can't make a movie about like somebody driving in the 70s. There's a movie called Vanishing Point.
Oh yeah.
But that guy wasn't necessarily a getaway driver. He was just sort of a guy that like took a car and went nuts. Thing, right? He steals a car and just goes on a crazy chase. Which is another driving movie that Tarantino likes, and it's mentioned in the movie.
Death Proof?
Death Proof, yeah. They talk about Death Proof because they talk about the kind of car he used in Death Proof. Of course, this being a 70s movie, this features some 70s cars. Although it's funny, probably the fanciest of the 70s cars is one that doesn't even use any chases. It's the one he like smashes up in the garage.
It's a Mercedes?
Yeah, it's some sort of Mercedes model, and he just like smashes. He doesn't use any chase. He just smashes it all to hell. But I mean, the opening of this movie and Drive are very similar because they both open with, you know, him on the job, somebody pulling off a robbery, him waiting for them to come, and then him getting away from the cops. And they're very similar, but of course, Drive ups the styles a bit, because another difference between this and Drive, and of course, Baby Driver, is like those movies, a big part of their style is the music. This movie barely uses music, and they don't use any music for the actual chase scenes. None of the chase scenes have music, unless you count in the last chase when he and the player have chased Teeth and his driver into that warehouse. Once they've sort of stopped chasing and they're doing that hide and seek thing where they're just slowly driving around the warehouse, some music comes up for that. But that's not like during the actual, you know, racing around breakneck speed type stuff. This movie just relies completely on, you know, putting you in the moment and just all the sounds that are in there organically without having any music added, which is a good choice. I mean, I love the use of music in those other two movies. I think it's great. Just saying that it's be done another way too.
It may be just a little bit much in this, just a little, because it's an awful lot of screeching tires. But yeah, I don't mind it at all. I just feel like maybe just a hint of music, you know, flavored throughout, maybe a good idea. But anyway, you mentioned the cars, and you know those are some big bodied vehicles. You know, and the way he handles them, you know, is just amazing, because I wouldn't imagine those vehicles literally drive very well.
All right, that's another thing that's worth pointing out is like, I mean, no matter what era stunt driving, I have a lot of respect for these stunt drivers to pulling off these stunts in these movies, whether it's Fast and Furious or whatever, right? Some very good stunt driving. But yeah, in the 70s, you know, cars didn't handle as well as cars made now. And they weren't nearly as safe either, right?
Right.
Like in the 70s, in real life, vehicle fatalities in like North America were at an all-time high. And it was throughout the 80s and coming into the 90s that, you know, there was all sorts of regulation and changes made to make it more safe. You know, we're never going to live in a world where car accidents aren't going to happen. People aren't going to get killed on the highway and stuff. But it was really kind of at its height in the 70s.
Did seatbelts even exist in the 70s? I don't even know.
I think they existed, but they were not mandatory, I don't think.
Well, we didn't wear them. I mean, I wasn't born in the 70s, but we didn't wear them in the 80s. That's for damn sure.
I mean, I drove don't have a lot of experience, but I remember a couple times driving a car that was maybe an 84 model, and I found it very hard to handle. Now, it didn't have the giant steering wheel that like the 70s cars had, but still, like, I have driven a car that doesn't have like power steering, and it's crazy. Like, we take power steering for granted. You're driving your car down the road, and you're just barely touching it. The car is reacting. Cars without power steering, you're like,
you have to
just to pull into like a normal parking space.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I've never driven one very much. Like, I mean,
No, me neither. Only a couple times. Only a couple times.
I mean, I've had a car where the power steering went out before, so I kind of got that experience that way. But it's.
And when did automatic shifting come in? Like all these cars they're driving in this movie was like, standard, right? You're like manually shifting the gears, I'd imagine. Which is something I learned when I was first learning how to drive, but I've completely forgotten how. Because my parents, when I was learning how to drive, they thought it would be important for me to learn to drive standard too, and they had somebody that had a car like that, and I went along with it, and I learned it, but it's one of those things I completely lost because I don't own a car, so I don't get to drive much anyway. But yeah, so
I've never had a standard before. I wish I had, just so I would know how to drive one. But I mean, I know the concept, but I've never actually driven one very far.
That is a skill that I briefly had and, very sort of quickly lost. Like if you put me in a standard now, I would really mess up because I just don't remember. It's been too long, way too long.
I mean, automatic is pretty much the standard now, right?
Oh yeah. Like the only like standards you get now are like really specialized like sports cars and stuff, right? Yeah. I'd imagine.
And even a lot of those are automatic transmissions.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so there's an extra sort of layer here with these sort of 70s cars they're using of like just how skilled these drivers are to pull off these hard stunts with cars that just don't handle nearly as well as cars made now, and cars that aren't as safe as cars made now. So a lot of respect for that, for sure. But you can tell in the opening scene of Drive that the movie, of course, follows the same beats and everything too. But I mean, it is its own movie. It has its own different plot, and it has the whole subplot about him getting involved with the woman and her kid and stuff. But the opening is basically them just completely homaging this movie because the opening is very similar sort of thing, right down to the idea that really, I think maybe hadn't been used enough in some of the car chases in movies before that. Was like, you're trying to get away from the cops or whoever. It's not about just outrunning them. It's about outmaneuvering them. Is really the difference. And you have and it's in this movie and the other movie too, like the whole thing, like there's a part that he uses a couple times in Drive where like he briefly sort of gets into a spot and turns all the lights off and just sort of hides and then waits for his moment. He does that like a couple times in Drive, but it's in this movie too, where he pulls into like an alleyway and the lights all go off and he's waiting for an opening as the police cars zip around. It's really cool. But that opening robbery at the casino, I guess it was, pulled off the two guys in the mask. Of course, they don't have names. It's like green mask and blue mask. But I don't remember which mask. But the guy who's the black mask. I'm trying to think, his name was Bob Miner, who would go on to be a pretty important stuntman in Hollywood for through the 80s and 90s. He was the stunt double for a lot of prominent black actors like Danny Glover, Jim Brown, I think even Carl Weathers, a few others. So kind of a cool, not exactly a cameo. He wasn't really, but yeah, kind of cool that he's in there. And that one, because he's actually not really doing a stunt in this movie. He's just all along for the ride.
I was trying to remember what car Ryan Gosling drove in that opening sequence.
Was it some kind of Camaro?
I know it was a really popular vehicle because that's the whole theory, right? Is you don't want something that really stands out.
All right.
You want to blend in. I can't find a exterior shot.
Yeah.
I'm watching it on YouTube.
I feel like if I ever buy a car, just because these movies influence me so much, I'll be one of those people that's more concerned with performance, despite the fact that I am not trying to outrun the cops or drive over the mountains. Because you can always look that up on the internet, right? Look up cars what are the cars that are known for performance? Maybe having more horsepower than you expect from an ordinary car. I think it's because, this is the one thing I'd really like to do. I love rally racing. I really like. I don't really get to watch it or anything. It doesn't come on, but I always love those souped up. You take something like an Impreza or a Subaru, and they soup them up and they zip them through like these really interesting areas, like where they have to go through like forests and mud and stuff. I always thought that was really interesting and cool, and I always really liked those cars. I've mentioned this a couple times when I was talking about how, like, in Jackie Chan movies, one of the stunts that's underrated in Jackie Chan movies is the driving. And in the movie Who Am I, his character is one of those drivers. He's like a rally racer. So the whole opening of Who Am I is like some really cool car stunts with them doing that race. At that point, they're like racing across a desert or something. Another like rabbit hole I like to go down is like I miss those like those super long distance races they used to have in the first half of the 20th century. Like they'd be like race across, like they go like from Paris to Shanghai or something, like race across the Gobi Desert, and I loved all that stuff. Like I want to see more movies about those things. There's some good plane ones too, and where people like died and they were crazy. Like I really like that. We don't live in that world anymore now, but I liked it. Like some like crazy millionaire would be like, I'll give a prize of $100,000 to whoever can come up with the shortest route between this, and all these people who come out of the woodwork, stunt drivers and crazy people, and I love that stuff. I mean,
yeah,
I shouldn't, because it's kind of tragic because people did actually die. But I mean, how much time, enough time has passed. I guess we can just look at it for the spectacle that it was. But yeah. And the closest thing we have to that nowadays is like sort of the rally racing. So that's not this at all. But that's just sort of an angle in cars I've always found interesting. I like the idea of taking like, just sort of an everyday car that anybody would buy to drive around the city. But, then you just make some modifications to it to like soup it up a little, give it some more performance. That was cool. Which obviously they do in those Fast and Furious movies, right? Like they've got various sports cars, but they aren't always like super high-end sports cars. They're like, some of them are kind of like normal, but then, they do extra work to them and they give them crazy stuff like nitrous boost and stuff like that. No, I don't want nitrous boost. I don't think I would ever have a use for that. And plus, like, if I didn't kill myself, I'm sure I'd be immediately arrested.
Yeah, one of my old neighbor, thank God I don't live next to this guy anymore. An older guy, he was probably like late 40s, 50s when I lived next to him. And he had a Mustang, not very old Mustang, but just loud pipes on it, would just be, just making noise all the damn time. Like,
yeah,
just an asshole.
That's something I really don't like about those 70s cars, is how loud they were. A lot of them. You get like an old Dodge Charger. Yeah. Which is the Dodge Charger? Is that from Vanishing Point? Something like that.
I should probably know the answer to that.
Apparently my father's first car was a Dodge Charger, which sounds pretty cool.
No, that's what the General Lee was.
Yeah,
we can't speak of that anymore, but
yeah.
I
mean, that was a show where car stunts were a big deal. Although I think a lot of the times those weren't realistic. I think they did a lot of stuff that you couldn't really do in real life, right? They do like weird. They do like crazy jumps that I don't think you would actually be able to walk away from.
You can't do it, and like your car is like still drivable after the fact, and you probably get hurt.
Yeah, like what's this thing reinforced with that it's like flying through the air and then landing and still driving? Apparently that's a show I watched a lot as a little kid, but I don't remember.
I watched it a lot as a little kid too. I don't remember much about it, but I just remember Daisy Duke with the shorts and the cars flying around everywhere.
See, I was so young I didn't even notice or remember her. Like I had to be told that I watched it because I have zero memory.
Oh, really?
Like I had to be told that I watched it. That was new. That was news to me.
What was the impression of that? Like in Canada of that show?
I mean, I think people liked it. I mean, it made sense that I watched it with my grandfather because that was the kind of stuff he was into anyway. Him being sort of like a more country type guy, I guess.
But it wasn't like, look at these racist white people. I mean, that wasn't really the impression, right?
No, I don't think so at all. I think most people thought it was a fairly kind of even sort of wholesome show. It wasn't a serious show. It was just about sort of some shenanigans going on. And sometimes like they helped the cops, like sometimes like catch criminals and stuff, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they were basically good guys. I mean, I in my adult life, or even as like, I don't know any like full episodes, so I can't speak to like if they had like weird like did they have terrible stereotypes in it? If they did, I don't know. Maybe
no,
they did.
I don't think they did. I think they were all like basically good character. Like they were, the Loot boys were
right.
good, but I think the local sheriff had it out for them for some reason. And,
right, but it was more of like a joke, right? Like the sheriff wasn't necessarily a bad guy. It was just more, it was more like a playful thing, right?
Bumbling idiot.
Yeah, it was more like that. It wasn't like he was some corrupt sheriff that was like, I don't know, like getting kickbacks or beating up people in handcuffs or anything. Like, yeah, it was more of a lighthearted type show from what I've read about it. Because again, I don't have any memory of watching it whatsoever. This is something my parents told me. It makes sense though, yeah, that probably my grandfather would have been a fan. So maybe I guess I watched it with him when I was like a little kid, but I don't remember it. I certainly didn't watch it on like my own time at home.
It was a pretty popular show, like around the, at least in America, I think. Not just in the South. Like I think it was popular like in the entire country.
Yeah, I'd say it was pretty popular here.
But I was just curious, because it's got a really bad reputation now, just because of the rebel flag painted on the front of the Charger there.
Right. I mean, I get it. Yeah, I get that. But I mean, I think that's taking things a little too far, right?
Mm-hmm. I agree with you, but
apparently, yeah. I mean, for everything that I know about that show is like the show, it was not that very serious show. It was just sort of a lighthearted show about wacky adventures and stuff. As far as I've heard, yeah, there weren't like bad stereotypes on it or anything like that. So yeah, I don't think there's anything to be too upset about.
It's kind of like a family show.
Yeah. I mean, that I guess that was the context I watched it. I was a little kid who watched it with my grandfather, although I don't remember it. But I mean, that's how I watched it. So
like the Partridge Family, the Brady Bunch, and Dukes of Hazzard,
Right. Like it had some violence on it, but it was more like a slapstick type violence. It was not serious at all.
The car in the Vanishing Point was the Challenger. So
I said Charger, right? Yeah, Challenger, not Charger. Challenger. That's pretty cool.
They're making both of those again now. Dodge.
Huh. That's pretty cool.
I think Pizzow has a Challenger actually.
Oh, cool.
Or he did at one point.
A show I do remember watching with my grandfather was a Canadian show called. Okay, it's not Danger Bay. Shit, I thought I had it. It's not Danger Bay. It was something else Bay. I'll have to think of it later. I thought I found it, but it's not. It's not Danger Bay. I looked up Danger Bay. It only ran for 6 episodes, so it's not that. But I think it had Bay in the title. But anyway, it had this really cool opening with like a helicopter. And that was like my favorite part. Like anytime they used the helicopter, it was about like some community that was like out like in the woods or the mountains or something. So they often had to like fly this like rescue chopper to like save like hikers and stuff like that. I was really into that. I can't remember what show it was though. I wanted to say it was Danger Bay, but it's not Danger Bay. Even though that it was a Canadian show that ran in the 80s, but it's not it.
The show you're talking about was Canadian?
Yeah. It just had this really, I just remember the opening really well because like a lot of the time they had to use like a helicopter. It was like, it was like set in like the mountains, so I think it was maybe about like a rescue service that had to like, save missing mountain climbers and hikers and things like that or something like that.
I feel like I've probably seen some of that.
Yeah. I could have sworn Bay was in the title.
Vehicles were very iconic, like in the 80s for some reason.
Right, and that was a big part, like especially if you're a boy, right?
Right.
Because I mean, my big one was Transformers. They were robots, but they were also vehicles. But yeah, I was obsessed with all these vehicles. G.I. Joe had all its like crazy, fictional military vehicles. Where I was like, why doesn't the military really make this? This is cool. That show Mask vehicles.
Yeah, I love Mask. Yeah, Sean beat me to it. I was going to bring up Airwolf.
Yeah, that's another helicopter show, right? Yeah. And
of course, the A-Team had their van.
Now, the A-Team is the one I do remember watching with my grandfather. I remember watching that. Like, said this before. Like, yeah, probably like Mr. T was probably the first example for me of like, just the example of tough. Like, if I was a little kid, you asked me like, who's a tough guy? I'd be like Mr. T. He was.
Unless you're talking about flying. He's
a tough guy. VA. But see, that's a show I do remember. watching. And I probably watched a little bit of my own time too, but I definitely did watch that with my grandfather. But yeah, that was interesting. That was a cool show.
Knight Rider.
Of course, that was all about a car, right? It was all about having like a fancy special car. So yeah, vehicle-based stuff was a big deal in the 80s, and it was really impressionable to, if you were like a young boy at that time, really into all that stuff. It's weird how, like, especially when more so animated, like, I like how this is less to do with vehicles, but in the 80s, animated shows were really crazy and out there, right? They were like, there was stuff like Thundercats, just crazy out there shows with like wild He-Man, wild fantasy worlds and other planets, stuff like that. And then there was a shift in the 90s to like kids cartoons was always kind of like about like ordinary kids and people like hanging out in like neighborhoods and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like so many like of those 90s shows like suddenly shifted. It's like, yeah, now it'll just be like sort of a group of kids hanging out in the city. Like there were so many things like that. Even ones I didn't watch because like something like a Hey Arnold, I never watched that crap. But that was one. Yeah. There was a really crappy one called Doug. Things like that in the 90s. Pepper Ann. Even Rugrats to a certain extent, even though that was babies. But yeah, suddenly it was weird. Like a lot of like the 90s show is just like, it's just a bunch of kids sort of hanging out and stuff happens after like I'd grown up on like all these 80s shows where it's like, fantastic powers and adventures and craziness, gummy bears bouncing all off the walls and stuff. And, the 90s was more grounded. I think it was part of like that whole thing of all the decades, the 90s tried so hard to be cool, especially for kids, right? So it's like this is about a bunch of cool kids with baggy clothes that hang out behind the mall. Yeah. But anyway, that's not related to the vehicle stuff.
Yeah.
Right, that stuff kind of disappeared entirely too in the 90s, right? Like, well, unless you counted like Power Rangers where they had Zords.
Cars were kind of crappy in the 90s, weren't they?
Yeah, I guess. They were kind of bland. Just, more what it is. Like, they weren't interesting. They kind of lost their personality a bit, I think, in the 90s. I mean, I'm not a car guy, so I don't know, but that's kind of my, in the 90s, think like, what's a 90s car? It's like a Saturn. It's like, ooh, that's exciting. Didn't you wish you had a Saturn? No. A Dodge Neon? Yeah, no. And of course, it was the decade where the minivan rose to prominence, right? That was like the car for like the suburbs, your family. You got a minivan. You got your 2 or 3 kids. You got the minivan, taking them to soccer practice. See, my family was different because we had a real van.
Yeah, you had an Astro van?
We had an Astro van, a full van.
That's a real van.
That was a real van. And we were kind of ahead of that whole movement. Because it was great for like going to and we used to carpool and pick up kids and take them to places like hockey practice and band practice and stuff like that. My mom used to do that since she didn't work.
I think Cole will probably agree with you, Sean.
It's my favorite show of all time. So, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it's like this far behind Evangelion, but yeah. Very close. But yeah, I don't just think it's best cartoon of the 90s or best cartoon or best show of the 90s or best superhero show. I think it's like one of the best shows ever created by humans, period. Like, I'd rather watch that than so many of these shows that people like now. And I'm not coming down on them. I just mean, I get it. Like, these people that are blown away by The Wire and they're blown away by Sopranos and all that, that's great. But for me, it is Batman the Animated Series. I'm not even kidding. But yeah, love that show. And Batman Beyond, which I was initially disappointed in, turned out to be pretty good and underrated.
Never watched that one.
I think you'd find things to appreciate about it.
Was that the one in the future?
Yeah, it was the one in the future where Bruce Wayne's an old man and he takes on a new kid to be Batman.
Mm-hmm. I didn't really for the most part.
Well, what I would recommend is they made a movie for it for like its finale called Return of the Joker. Okay. You should watch that. I think you'd really like that. It's a really cool movie. But Mark Hamill once again is the Joker.
I pulled up a list of car movies like from the 90s because I can't think of any.
Right.
At all. Like, it's so weird.
Are there any on the list?
Oh, another one would be Christine. That'd be a good one.
Right, that's 83.
I mean, not really an 80s car, but
yeah, it's actually a 50s car was the whole point, right? Like, he gets this 50s car.
DeLorean? How did we forget that one?
Yeah. The DeLorean was one of the most iconic vehicles of the 80s and, of course, cinema.
They remade Vanishing Point. I'm not going to say that counts.
No.
No. I don't agree with any of these. These are stupid. The Chase with Charlie Sheen. I don't even know what kind of car that was.
No idea.
A red one?
Yeah, car movies were pretty dormant in the 90s.
I mean, just like they had cars in them, but they weren't like memorable, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the most memorable cars in the 90s, I think, were maybe like some of the James Bond cars, maybe.
Or maybe like Gone in 60 Seconds.
Because, I mean, yeah, that movie's not bad. That's like one of the few movies that like did revolve around cars from the 90s. I haven't seen it in 100 years. It's worth seeing just because Angelina Jolie's in her fucking prime in that movie.
Oh, yeah. Totally, Sean.
Oh, yeah, Mad Max. Yeah, a lot. So, yeah, like, iconic vehicles were a big thing in the 80s, kind of not so much in the 90s at all. Like I said, unless you counted something like Bond, which had been, had established that since they began in the 60s. Like, every Bond's going to have, like, a...
Yeah, Pierce Brosnan had that, the little BMW. BMW. That, not M3. I forget the name of it, but that was a cool car.
Yeah. Was that in Tomorrow Never Dies?
Possibly, because I actually like Tomorrow Never Dies a lot.
Tomorrow Never Dies is the one where like he's actually like remote controlling the car at one point to like lead the bad guys away. Like he's not in the car; he's just like using. I think that was a BMW. I like Tomorrow Never Dies too. I mean, it's not great, but it's a good movie. It's a fun movie. But yeah, I just think that the Bond series was kind of the only thing keeping that alive in the 90s. Because yeah, the 90s is not really known for having vehicles or even, shows or movies that really revolve too much around vehicles, unless there's something obvious that I'm forgetting. So that like the biggest thing I can think of is like Power Rangers and their Zords.
That's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, things always seem to run in cycles, don't they? Like the 90s was down for a lot of things. Like zombie movies basically disappeared in the 90s. Slashers were gone until like sort of like the late part, with sort of a renaissance brought on by Scream in 96, which we've talked about a lot in horror various shows. Like, so things run in cycles. Things are cool at one moment and not so big. One thing that's never really come back, although there's one every few years, and I was thinking about this because I watched, and we don't have to talk about this now because it's too long and too forever, but I did watch the Snyder Cut of Justice League. Not going to talk about it now. But one thing that did strike me, of course, being a 4-hour-long movie, was like that, epics are pretty rare because obviously they're costly and ambitious and time-consuming and stuff like that. But I mean, there was a time where in like the 50s and early 60s, like epics were just pretty ordinary thing. They happened all the time. You had the big biblical ones like the Ten Commandments, or the one that's that story of Jesus that I can't remember what it's called. You had Cleopatra. Cleopatra is fucking 4 hours. That's from 63. It's from 62. You had Lawrence of Arabia. Just huge movies. And then like they really slowed down in the decades since. And now only ever once in a while does another epic sort of pop up. I like them so much. I remember I made it the topic of one of our Sausage Factory shows years ago. I'd like to rewatch that because I don't remember it anymore. But I was thinking, like, good or bad, it is kind of cool that this Justice League cut came out because it's like a superhero epic, which is something like you couldn't even conceive of years ago. As big as superhero movies have become, it still didn't really think, such a thing like that would really happen. I mean, I guess you could say Avengers Endgame is an epic.
Yeah. I think you could probably call that an epic.
Yeah. But I do think it is pretty cool because, I mean, superhero movies actually do lend themselves well to that because of their sense of scope and grandeur. I'm not saying every single one of them should be, but it is cool when one comes along. So I did appreciate that about this Snyder Cut.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I sunk a lot of time into that movie because I don't like breaking movies up. So I watched the first 2 hours and some and had to bail out. And then I said, I'll start it again. And I did like the exact same thing. So it was my third attempt. By the time I watched it all the way through, I'd seen the first half twice already. So I sunk a lot of time into that movie. And I had to like make time because at first I was not really keen on watching it too soon. I was like, I'll give it some time. I don't need to talk about this now. But then it just sort of got into my brain. I was like, okay, it's there. I should watch it. But anyway, I'm not going to blab about that. I'm trying to think about vehicle stuff. But yeah, these things aren't in cycles. We talked about this before. Like, we like to talk about martial arts movies. You know, their golden age was really the 70s and like sort of the first half of the 80s. And then in like the very end of the 90s, early 2000s, there was kind of like a weird false start where it seemed like some of those martial arts epics, like these big Chinese movies, were going to become like a thing over here because of like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and a couple of them got some theatrical releases. We talked about them before, like Hero and Fearless and House of Flying Daggers. But none of them really did that well, and then they kind of faded away. So things just run in cycles. So I guess we've had a little bit of a vehicle renaissance in like the last decade, although not by that much. But I mean, think about it. Drive was a decade ago. It was 2011. Baby Driver was, I think, 2017. And of course, but during that whole time, we've had this big vehicle-driven franchise, The Fast and the Furious. So. Mm-hmm. It feels like those movies will continue for all time, but eventually they're going to die off too.
Yeah, that's when they stop making money. Yeah. I used to defend those movies, but yeah,
I haven't seen any of those movies all the way through except the first one. Other ones, they're on TV a lot, so I've seen bits and pieces, but I can't keep them straight. We talked about this before too, like how confusing they're named as far as sequels go. It's like The Fast and the Furious, Too Fast, Too Furious. Faster and Furious Drift. Yeah, one is just called like Furious or something. I don't know. They just got weird, wacky titles.
Fast 5.
Yeah, Fast 5. Furious 7. I mean, I don't know. It's just all over the place. I don't know. Maybe someday it is worth watching those in order because they do have a certain continuity to them. I know that. Like, there is like a core of characters. I know the third one doesn't have anything to do with anything. Tokyo Drift is all like different characters, I think. But besides that, it is like a core cast of like Vin Diesel and Paul Walker, of course, until he died.
I think Tokyo Drift is a prequel.
Okay, yeah.
Possibly. I haven't seen it.
Michelle Rodriguez was dead for a couple movies, but then they brought her back, like that she was not dead somehow. I don't know. And of course, they brought The Rock in at some point, and he became a normal part of it. It's like that's how you just pump up any franchise. Just add Dwayne Johnson.
Well, then they did a spinoff with was it Jason Statham and The Rock?
Yeah, Hobbs and Shaw.
Yeah, that's it.
Where they like have to like team up to fight like Idris Elba is like some kind of like some sort of like super soldier. Like he's got like the Captain America serum in him or something. Like it's something like that. Like he's like genetically enhanced or something. It's like I did not know those movies went down that road, but apparently why not? I mean, they've got like crazy nonsense going on in them. I mean, one of them has a pretty crazy part, but is cool. Like where they're using vehicles to like, I think they're in Rio de Janeiro, and they're like zipping down the streets, like dragging like a gigantic safe or something.
Yeah, I've seen that one.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty interesting.
I think the first one The Rock was in, like, there's one part where he's in a cast, and he just like flexes and breaks out of his cast.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if you want to talk about like how like if people want to complain about how things have been like watered down in like the last few years, or things aren't the way they were. I mean, those movies are super macho, man. I mean, they've got that. Like you can't say like, like people be like, there's no like super masculine heroes anymore. I'm like, you kidding? Look at all the testosterone going on in that series. And like pretty much and I mean, I'm sure there's strong female roles in that, but those movies just loaded with like TNA as like background. They're always going to like some club or party where the bad guys hang out, where there's just like, girls like in thongs and bikinis just everywhere dancing all over the place. It's like a fucking music video. Like that's just required. There's at least one or two of those scenes in every one of those movies.
Yeah. It's just like a focus up on a thong.
Yeah. So, I mean, so if anybody wants to say like, movies are politically correct now or whatever like that, well, this is still going on. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying there's that option. I'm saying, yeah, like he just flexes and he breaks out of the cast. I mean, that's so like an Arnold type thing.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't love that part? Like, obviously, the most testosterone-driven movie of all time, and the best of all of them is Predator. Yeah. And like before Predator even gets going, you have that moment where like Carl Weathers and Arnold meet. Remember, and they just do the handshake, and they just and their biceps are like bulging. It's like,
been pushing pencils.
Yeah, it's like, you son of a bitch. Yeah, and then they just go and their biceps, and they're just flexing. Yeah, that's great.
Which Arnold was massive then, and it just shows you how big. What's the guy's name? The other guy,
Carl Weathers.
Carl Weathers, yeah, because he was huge too. He had huge arms.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, if somebody looks small compared to Arnold, remember Arnold was like a freak of nature.
He really was. Yeah. Arnold's whole thing was proportion. That's why they loved him so much, because his body was proportioned. He wasn't like freakishly big legs or something.
Right. I guess that is a difficult thing to pull off if you're gonna like push it that far, like the bodybuilding.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we've seen things on them and they look crazy. It's like, why do you want to look like this? Can you even bend over?
Right. My glutes, damn it, my glutes won't pop.
Because I mean, you have to think there's got to be a point where, like, when these guys are first starting out, where they look great, where they're toned, completely head to toe, like everything's perfect, and then they just keep going and like push it to ridiculous proportions. Like, you probably had a moment where you looked like fantastic, where you looked like a fucking Greek statue, and then you were just like, not enough.
Yeah. Oh yeah. More steroids.
It's a weird ideal to push for.
It is. Once you get past a certain point, it's like you're really limiting your mobility.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can you walk through a door, like forward, like front ways?
Yeah.
You have to turn sideways?
Yeah, like, I'm not even worried about pissing off like a big guy like that, because I'm like, I'm pretty sure I can get out of the way before he throws a punch at me or something. I'm pretty sure he doesn't have great footwork.
Yeah, well, and you could beat him in a foot race.
Yeah, exactly. Halifax isn't a huge city. I have never really seen a guy like that in person, I don't think. Like, totally jacked. Like, I've seen some, guys that are definitely got some big arms and stuff, but I've never seen like what somebody with like a real bodybuilder. I'm sure there's at least a few around here, but I've never really seen them. Must be really something to behold in person.
When I used to go to a big gym, there was a few guys like that. As they do the posing contest and stuff.
Yeah, there's this really funny episode of King of the Hill where like Bill has to get in shape, and he winds up falling in with a group of those guys, and they're played by Randy Savage and a couple other like real life wrestlers. Oh, it's so funny. They basically set up a gym in his neighborhood, and they take it over, and they're like complete assholes. They like blast like heavy metal and go and scream in everybody's faces. It's pretty funny.
That sounds cool.
Yeah. At one point, like, Bill tries to do too much weight of that one. I don't remember what any machines are called. But one where you're on your back and you use your legs to push the weight up, and he does like too much, so he like blows his back out, and he's just lying there helpless. And they come in and they're like, "Oh, this is great." He's like, "Help me!" And they're like, "Oh no, this is great." And they just leave him. It's pretty funny. They're like, when your whole body's like on fire or whatever, you're pushing it to the max, or I don't know. This stuff's pretty funny.
Yeah, I found some thumbnails of that episode.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's a good shot at all that culture. Like, explains like why people don't want to be in gyms with guys like that, because they're just crazy intense all the time.
Yeah, we have a gym called Planet Fitness here. It's like a chain gym, and they call those guys lunks. And there's an alarm button in the place that you can go push if someone's being a lunk. Someone's like grunting really loud or something.
Oh man!
Which they do that. They do it.
I mean, there's gyms here. Like, there's a gym that's in like the kind of like where my downtown cinema is. There's a gym like in the same like building, and a lot of people go there. I don't know what the culture's like or anything like that. I've thought about going a few times. I don't know. I need to do something because I haven't been able to train martial arts for 2 years now. Which is, I never meant to be away this long. Then COVID obviously added another layer to it.
I mean, I can't really see how. You have to spar, right? I mean, you have to get closer than 6 feet to spar. So
yeah, I mean, just even like stretching stuff often, and you need people really close because some of it's 2-person stuff, and yeah. I mean, I don't like doing it, and that's one of the reasons why, like, I was never interested in a grappling martial art because that's like too much contact. I'm not comfortable with that.
Yeah, I'm not either. But you have to do it to get better at it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
You can't do that on a dummy. You're like, put you in a guillotine, dummy. Got you again.
Yeah.
But on that note, TJ Dillashaw has a fight coming up for the.
Yeah, that's right. I
believe it's for the title, isn't it? It's a vacant title. Wasn't what's his name champ when he left?
Oh yeah, it's bantamweight, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Cejudo had been champ of both. He was flyweight champ. He moved up, beat Dillashaw, and became champ of bantamweight too. And then of course he retired. So they had so they already had the fight for the vacant flyweight title. And that, by the way, was the best flyweight fight in the history of fights. If you can find that, watch it.
Who won that? I'm not even familiar.
Nobody was a draw.
Really?
So Figueiredo was he already won. So it wasn't the vacant one. He'd already won. He was the champ, Figueiredo, and then he fought the Mexican guy, and Figueiredo would have won, but he had a point taken away from him for like an illegal knee or something like that. But it was still an amazing fight. But anyway, it was a draw. But since you can't lose the title for a draw, so he kept the title. So they're going to rematch at some point.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be good, but when you have a fight that good, there's no way it can be as good. But it was by far the best flyweight fight I'd ever seen. It was incredible. So that's Figueiredo. He's a Brazilian guy. But yeah, I guess it's still vacant for bantamweight. So yeah, that's right. Dillashaw's going to fight. I already read about this and I can't remember. But anyway, somebody really good.
Yeah, I don't remember who it was either. I made a note that Dillashaw was fighting again.
Yeah, one of those title fights that was coming up is canceled. It was a really good fight, and the guy had to pull out because of COVID. He tested positive.
Damn it!
Here, I gotta look this up.
What? There's a big fight coming up soon, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the rematch. The Usman, Madvidal or whatever his name is.
Masvidal.
I was close.
Yeah. The next fight coming up is the heavyweight one. It's the rematch between Miocic and Ngannou. I never saw their first fight, but I guess it wasn't very good.
That heavyweight division needs some work, man.
There's finally some talent coming up. I mean, there's finally some young talent. This is probably the best it's actually ever been, I think. Because even though he is a bit older, Miocic is arguably the best champion they've ever had. I mean, he has the most defenses and everything. And he did, get the title back after he briefly lost it to Cormier. He did get it back in fairly emphatic fashion.
Mm-hmm.
But no, you've got the French guy, Cyril Gane. His last fight was boring, but he's really good, and he's a younger guy. Ngannou is just a destroyer. He kills everybody except for Miocic. Lewis has had a resurgence. He knocked out Blades, which made me really happy because I don't like Blades at all. The big Russian guy is having a really good time, and he's still quite young, Volkov.
I like Volkov.
Yeah, he's coming off some really good performances. In fact, if you take away that last second knockout that he lost to Lewis, his record's really good if you take that loss out. Like, he was dominating. He had at least 2 10-8 rounds in that fight. And then Lewis just caught him with 11 seconds to go and finished him because Lewis is just that kind of.
Lewis throws bombs, man.
Exactly. But,
imagine a guy that big.
That's what he did in his last fight. He probably lost the first round against Blades, but in the second round, Blades tried to do a shoot-in, and boom, uppercut, gone. It's pretty cool. But anyway, so yeah, I think actually the heavyweight division might be the best it's ever been right now because it actually has guys that are under 35 coming up. So anyway. I don't really care much about that card beyond the fight.
John Jones will get a title shot after if he wins his first fight.
Which I'm fine with.
I'm not fine with him getting a title shot right off the bat, but.
I mean, if he wins.
I want to see him, yeah. I want to see him get the shit beat out of him.
I don't like Jones either, man. I'd love to see him.
I mean,
I'll give him credit though. Like he has bulked up. He will not be a small heavyweight. I've seen the pictures. He's got to be at least like 240.
Yeah, which is not a very big heavyweight.
No, but I mean it's at least up there. There's smaller heavyweights. There's a couple heavyweights out right now that are like 225. And everybody thought that was kind of the future because Cain Velasquez was not a big heavyweight. Everyone was like, he's like the future because he's like a smaller, faster, leaner heavyweight. And then injuries just ruined his career. So we'll never really know how good he could have been or what could have happened there, right?
He was a beast, man. But on his feet and on the ground. But injuries. He just kept getting injured and surgeries and injured again. And that's unfortunate.
I mean, that last fight that I watched, the title fight for light heavyweight, was interesting because, you had the unbeaten middleweight Adesanya. He took an interesting approach in that he didn't really bulk up to be a light heavyweight. He came in, I think, at like 200 pounds. And I mean, the main reason light heavyweight's 205, but most of the time, by the time they come in, they're a little heavier than that. Right?
Oh, sure.
But he was like 200 pounds on the nose. Like that's what he was. You could tell. He was that, and and the Polish guy probably weighed in like he made the weight of 205, but he probably came in a little heavier than that. I assume they usually do, right? But you could tell by Adesanya that he was 200, and that's what he was. And I mean that's really why he didn't win the fight because he got sort of controlled and manhandled. With the Polish guy put his weight on him, and that was that kind of.
I feel like he got a little too big of a head there.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's unfortunate because I like the guy a lot.
Well, I mean, he completely dismantled Costa, which even surprised me. Like, I thought that would at least be a competitive fight. Like, I thought he would probably beat Costa, but I didn't think he would beat him with such crazy ease. Like, Costa gave him nothing. Because speaking of, like, middleweights, Costa is, like, as big as a middleweight as you can get. Like, Costa is a big, bulked-up guy. Anyway.
Yeah, these guys gained, like, 30 pounds in the course of 2 days or a day.
Yeah,
the weigh-ins are on Friday and the fight's on a Saturday. Is that right? Usually, it's a day in between weigh-ins and the fight.
Yeah, it's amazing like how quickly they gain stuff back. I don't even know how it works. I don't understand. If weight cutting is so easy, how come like people in real life don't do it just like for things like people are like I have to make I had to fit into my dress for my sister's wedding on the in 2 months from now. I'm gonna go on a diet. I'm like just do whatever the fighters do because apparently they have no trouble at all.
Put on this rubber suit and get in a sauna on the bike.
Yeah, do the treadmill. Do the treadmill on the sauna.
Almost die.
I know, and that still happens. Just the other day, like some female fighter like fainted before her weigh-in or something. Yeah, I've talked about this endlessly. Like I don't understand it. Like either have weight divisions and people fight at the weight or don't. And I'm tired of people that are way too big for their weight divisions being such pussies. Like fight where you're supposed to fight. Don't go, I'm 6'2", but I'm going to be a lightweight. Like fuck you, man.
I mean, some people cut weight easier than others, so it's,
absolutely.
And I think it's probably something that gets easier with.
It mystifies me. I don't think I could do it.
Yeah, but it's. I mean, you see some guys that have a bad weight cut, like Junior Dos Santos, just got manhandled by Cain. When he just was just out of it. He was just not there. He wasn't himself because he had a bad weight cut.
I mean, Conor McGregor started his career as a featherweight, and he basically killed himself to be a featherweight. And I understand why he did it because he was taller and longer than all the featherweights, and he used it to his advantage. But then he got to a point where he couldn't do it anymore, and now he gets beat by lightweights. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But anyway,
his walking around weight is probably in the lightweight category. So
I mean, he's fought at 170, right? So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, he'll only fight Nate Diaz at 170. He wouldn't fight anybody for real at 170, right? Like he's never fought an actual welterweight. He's fought at welterweight, but he's only fought like a lightweight in Nate Diaz at welterweight. Like I think he'd get destroyed by any like top 15 welterweight.
I totally agree with you. I'd like to see it too.
Yeah, I still haven't actually seen footage of his loss to Poirier.
It was good.
Because I think it's the only time he's ever been KO'd. So it'd be satisfying to see.
Oh yeah,
I was watching that whole card, and then it crapped out on me going into the second round of that fight. I saw the first round fairly even, And
then, you saw the first round of it?
I saw the first round.
Oh, man, that does suck.
I know. Because the first round, not very much happened. It was a pretty even round in the first round. And then, everything.
I think Conor won the first round.
Yeah. A lot of people say that.
I'm not a Conor fan, so it doesn't please me to say that.
Yeah, he's in an interesting place coming off that loss. Because another one would really break him as like a big star.
Another guy that was looking to be a superstar, the Sean O'Malley.
Yeah, he's on the next card.
Is he? I was wondering when he was fighting next.
Right, he's on the next card.
Who's he fighting?
He's fighting Thomas Almeida, so he'll probably win. It's funny. Thomas Almeida was like the same thing as Sean O'Malley, like if you go back 3 or 4 years ago. He was another guy who was a young killer. He was unbeaten. But then he lost, and then ever since then, he's been mediocre. He kind of like, I think he's on like a 3-fight skid right now or something. So this is kind of a gimme fight for O'Malley because he was doing great until Vera put his lights out, which I thought was immensely satisfying. But he will probably win this fight unless Almeida is doing something I'm not aware of. But yeah, fuck O'Malley. I can't stand him. He's another guy who's all mouth. I get it. A lot of fighters are mouthy and they talk, and I don't hate all of them. I don't. But I'm never, I'm just wired to like really like more quieter guys.
Yeah.
And as everybody says, like the fight game, you got to build up hype and everything.
Dana trying to build his next superstar.
Yeah. And as they said, like McGregor, perfected it. So many people try to follow that model.
Yep. Get out there and shit talk some more.
Anyways. What do you think about the ending of this film? Because I've gone back and forth about how satisfying it really is. And also, I wonder, like, I don't like that we lose track of the money. It doesn't seem very fair. It feels like the movie's kind of cheating. Because to set it up for the audience, the money, and we'll go back to how this all happened, but the staged robbery, which they really did pull off, which got a lot of money, the driver winds up with it. Because he gets, the guy tries to double cross him and kill him. He kills him, takes the money. He takes the money and puts it in a locker at the train station. But as he says to the connection, that woman who's like his fence, the person that like sets up jobs or stuff like that, like, the police are going to track that money, dirty money, whatever like that. I need to be able to swap that out for clean money, right? Smaller bills, etc. So the whole point is to set up a meeting with somebody to do that at the train station, and that's how the movie ends. And it ends with trying to remember what that character's name is. That character's name is the exchange man. So, and of course he gets the player to help him. So the player, the woman, goes to the coffee bar, sits down, he sits next to her, and they switch keys. So he uses her key to open up the locker that the driver had given her to take out the dirty money, and then he replaces it with the clean money. And then he's supposed to leave on the train with the dirty money. The cops are watching all this, and the detective himself follows the guy into the train, eventually finds the dirty money, and catches up to him, and they shoot it out, and he kills him. But then they catch the driver going back to the locker to pick up the clean money, except once they catch him, there's nothing in the bag. The bag's empty. And what they say is, the exchange man must have ripped him off. But how? We don't see it, and we don't see what happened to that money. And I mean, that kind of bothers me that we don't see what happened.
I was thinking that he used some sort of, sleight of hand and the driver was able to keep the money somehow.
So you think the driver was in on it. So because that's the other thing, right? Like maybe the driver always meant for it to end this way. That like he knew the cops were on him. He knew they'd catch him, but he made it in such a way they'd catch him with an empty bag. Because he says to him, it looks like we both got screwed over. But maybe he doesn't mean it. Maybe it was part of his plan. So yeah, it is kind of open-ended about whether or not things went the way he intended or not. I mean, I guess you're supposed to probably think that he did intend for it to work this way because he's been, so competent throughout the movie. He's always been a step ahead. Because the thing is, even if the cops could still arrest him, but they know there's not, because they have what is called circumstantial evidence. But the detective knows it's not worth it and lets him go. because you're not really going to get much of you don't have much of a shot at a conviction. It would just be sort of a waste of time and taxpayer money to take that to trial. Circumstantial evidence on its own is not very good. So that's why it ends the way it does. People are wondering about that. But yeah, it's never made clear where the money goes and who was behind it. The driver says, "Oh, it looks like, the exchange man must have ripped us off." But you're right. It's a good point to think, well, no, maybe the driver had this in mind all along because he knew the cops were onto him. So he set it up in such a way that the money would disappear and he would, not get caught. Because he does make a point at one part where he doesn't actually care about the money. And he says that to the player. She says, "You don't care about the money, do you?" He said, "I'm thinking about even sending it to him." And I actually believe him. I think that's true. Because as much as he tries to distance himself from what the detective says about how it's like the game, right? They're playing the game. Like at first it's, well, you're playing a game, cop, and I'm a professional. But by the end you think, oh no, he's into the game. Because at the end of the day, he didn't care about the money. He cared more about kind of like, beating the cop at the game, which I thought, which is kind of funny and satisfying. I just don't like that we don't know. But maybe it is better that we don't know, I guess. I go back and forth. Like I really like the movie, big fan of the movie. But I go back and forth about whether or not it would have been better to, if he had a plan, let us in on it, or show us what happened to the money. Because at the end, we don't actually know where the money is.
Right. I mean, I kind of like that it's open-ended like that. I mean, I don't necessarily need a definitive answer.
Sure.
So I just like that the detective didn't get what he wanted.
Right.
He's the bad guy.
Right. It's going back to what we said about in La Samurai. It's picked up because in La Samurai, again, the cops are kind of the bad guys, right? Like, and they make a show of showing everybody that like they'll abuse their position and power and their authority, to do what they want. They'll do what they want. And the main cop even has that conversation with the piano player where he says something like, it doesn't matter to me how I get the job done as long as I get it done. Like I'm willing to break the rules, bend the rules, whatever. And this cop is the exact same way because he sets up the final robbery himself, right? He's become so, desperate that he can't catch this guy as often, even though he acts like he's all cool. He's like, I'm going to catch him. He actually does something highly illegal. He takes criminals that he caught pulling another job who should be thrown in jail and prosecuted. He lets them free on the deal that I'm going to set you up. You guys are going to pull a bank robbery and you're going to use the driver and then you're going to deliver him to me and I'll let you walk. You won't get the money, of course, but you'll walk on that and you won't get charged for your other crime. Like he's prepared to do that. So he really takes it to an extreme there. The detective, Bruce Dern's character, he's willing to do whatever it takes to win the game. Because it just shows, again, there's sort of different levels of abusing power and stuff like that, right? Because there still are worse cops than that. Because there are cops that break the rules and abuse authority, not because they care about actually, catching the bad guy, but, just to enrich themselves in some way, right? These are the cops that, they rip off the drug dealers. They take their money and don't report it. This is a cop who is not trying to enrich himself, but he's breaking the laws and the rules so he can, do his job. But still, it's not right. But it's one of those movies that ends like where you see this a lot in a lot of neo-noir movies where like not much has changed. By the time the movie's over, some people are dead, but as far as like the main characters, like kind of like nothing's changed for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're not any better or worse than where they started off, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Like the driver's still a free man, but it seems pretty clear he didn't get the money. Even if he did set it up, he probably didn't wind up with the money. So he didn't make a big score. Yeah. And the cop has basically failed. And his gamble didn't pay off. He pulled off, he attempted something very risky and it didn't work out for him. But it seems like he probably won't lose his job or anything. It seems like he has a lot of leeway. He's a really cocky character, the cop. Which I think is kind of a nice inversion because you're kind of used to seeing it the other way. The cop will, where like the criminal who gets away all the time is taunting the cop and the criminal's cocky and the cop is like by the book. In this, it's the other way. Like the cop is very smug and arrogant and everything he says. Whereas we got like a criminal who's very professional. Mm-hmm. He's very meticulous. We see, and again, that's in the Samurai, and they use it again in Drive, where this is a guy who's a very cautious, precise criminal. And it's funny because the cop keeps referring to him as like the cowboy, and he has that speech. He says, you know, they can just go around, do whatever you want, because that is what it sounds like to be a getaway driver. You know, the thrill. But he's not that kind of character. He's not in it for the thrill. You know, as thrilling and as exciting and as much adrenaline there must be in driving fast cars and eluding the cops, we're shown very early on. This guy just thinks it is a job. He's good at it, so he does it. It's his job. You know, he's not getting off on it. He's not taunting the cops. In fact, he's super cautious. The first robbery at the start that leads to the whole thing about him getting caught in, the whole reason he gets seen by a few witnesses is because the plan, the two guys in masks, they were late. Because after he gets away and they say something like, you know, get ready for next time, he says, there's not going to be a next time. You guys were late. And that's the way he works. Like, if you don't, you know, follow my rules, we're done. So
and that's the same thing that happens in Drive.
Right, exactly.
They were late in that one.
That's how that one opens too, right? Yeah, he says, no, we're not doing this again. And of course, that gets him into a whole thing with these criminals that don't take no for an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they're just as ruthless in this. It's just there's less violence. I mean, it's just sort of quick and over with. Like, both Glasses and Teeth are ruthless killers, as it turns out, to the point that Teeth kills his own former associate, their original driver, right?
Right.
It really tips you off that he's not going to follow the cop's plan, too.
Right.
As we said, the cop sets Teeth and his gang up and says, okay, you're going to pull off this bank job, and you're going to, you know, deliver the driver to me. I'll arrest him. I'll have to give the money back to the bank, but as far as the crime I arrested you for, you're free to go. Pretty good deal. But Glasses takes it a step further and thinks, no, I'll just I'll take the money for real. I won't hand him in. I'll kill the driver myself. And during it, he's like, you know that he's not going to follow it because he's getting really impatient. It's like, why do you care about how slow this is? And he gets mad at his friend for being slow and, you know, kills him. So, you know, right off the bat, I'm sure that was the big tip off to the driver, who doesn't trust people anyway, to know not to trust this guy because 2 went in and 1 came out. And he doesn't even mention anything. So I do think it's true that, like, I don't think it's like the driver does actually carry a gun and lies about it. I think after meeting Teeth and Glasses and after what Teeth attacked him, he knew that he should have a gun. Because remember, after he brings him to the place where the red truck is and he says, you know, the cop set you up. I was supposed to bring you to him, but, you know, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take the money for myself and I'm going to kill you. He's like, I can't believe you. You have this line of work. You don't carry a gun. That's stupid. And then the driver shoots him from behind the door. It's like, not this time.
Yeah, he's real low too. It's like you can barely even tell that he has a gun. Yeah. He holds it like almost like at his waist.
Yeah, I mean that's why it's like a good con. When he steps out of the car, he leaves the door open so it blocks, right, so that you won't see. As to the question by Jacob, yeah, I mean I think so. I mean they kind of go out of their way with Gosling to show that, like, for whatever his moral code or ambiguities are, you know, he goes out of his way to help this woman and her kid. Like, he genuinely cares about other people. So you would say he's not a full-on sociopath. In fact, I don't even know how immoral the guy really is. I mean, the only people he hurt, he has the same no gun, no killing rule as ONeal had. And the only people he hurts are other criminals in that movie. I mean, I know it's pretty brutal. He, like, attacks people with a hammer and stuff like that. But I mean, these are criminals who are trying to kill him first.
Right.
So it's pretty clear to me that Gosling's character might have, you know, some moral ambiguity and not have the same qualms that maybe some more innocent people would have. But I would definitely not characterize him as a sociopath. I mean, they go out of their way to have this whole subplot about him not just being attracted to this woman and wanting to have sex with her, but genuinely wanting a relationship with her and genuinely liking her kid, which is, of course, you know, no relation to him. So I mean, if you get down to it, I mean, who's the colder, harsher professional? It is ONeal.
Mm-hmm. But even still, though, I don't know that I would call him a sociopath because, I mean, when he kills people, it's usually in self-defense.
Right, too. Like, he doesn't hurt anybody innocent. Like, he goes about his job. He goes about his job, and he has that no guns rule because he doesn't want innocent people to get killed. And you can say, oh, maybe just because he's being pragmatic because that leads to complications and more heat from the cops. But, I mean, still. You see that in a lot of movies, too, where they talk about, like, you know, when they're doing robberies and stuff. It's like, don't shoot people because it's sloppy. You know, it's not like it's wrong to murder people. It's like there's no point. You pull off a good job. You don't need to shoot anybody, which is pretty much true.
Well, you get a body, that's definitely more attention that's going to be paid to it.
Right, exactly. But So yeah, I don't really buy either of them as sociopaths, to tell you the truth. I just think of them as the way a lot of criminals are, in that they're able to make certain sort of compromises. They realize what they're doing is wrong and against the law, but there's certain things they're willing to do, and then there's certain things they aren't willing to do. And of course, he runs up against criminals that are, much more ruthless than him. These guys are certain, and that's what he says. Like, I don't want to be with a group of shooters, and he knew exactly what they were like, and they played out to type. They attacked him. They killed one of their own. They did whatever they could because they could.
Right.
So I mean, I guess he's kind of an anti-hero type guy. The audience is on his side from the beginning, even though we know he's a criminal. Kind of, again, going back to Le Samurai. We talked about this too, with Le Samurai. We don't know how much he winds up caring about the piano player. And at first, we don't know why he doesn't shoot her at the end. And you can just theorize about it. You can say, because he says, like, it seems to be his code that he'll kill who's paid to kill. Because that's what she says when he points the gun at her at the end, right? She says, why? I said, well, I was paid to. And that seems to be his code. But then it turns out, no, there's no bullets in the gun. He was never going to kill her. And we went back and forth. Did he just say that? Or is that really his code, but something was changed because, of course, the guy that hired him to do it in the first place tried to kill him, and he wound up killing him. And does that invalidate the code? Because when you came down to, again, I don't like bringing it up, but No Country for Old Men, when you have that killer, you get to the point at the end of the movie where, he's with, who is it? The main character's wife, right? And she says to him, there's absolutely no reason to kill me at this point. The people that wanted me dead are dead, whatever like that, right? And it doesn't let you know for sure that he kills her, but it seems pretty
sure he did.
Pretty clear that he did. And that's because that's his code, right? It didn't matter that, like, the people that wanted her dead are dead now, or that it didn't serve any purpose. The whole point was he was hired to kill her, so he was going to see it through. And I think that was the difference with Le Samurai, is I think he had maybe this code of, you pay me to kill somebody, I will. But I think it got invalidated when his employer tried to kill him. I think that's what it was. So, but I think it's actually easier with Drive and Driver, because they aren't really shown doing bad things. Every time they're doing violence, it's more or less self-defense. I mean, the worst thing they're doing is they are helping commit robberies. Yeah. But they're not threatening people themselves. They're not pointing guns at people. They're just drivers.
With Drive, I think they really go out of their way to show him as a compassionate person. Mm-hmm. Like, not only with the woman and her son, but is it yeah,
there's some, like, old mechanic he works for or something.
I'm trying to think of his name.
It's been a while since I've seen it.
The guy that's like the Breaking Bad guy, Bryan Cranston.
Right.
And he's like, they kill him, and he's pretty upset because that was his friend.
And they also they go out of their way to show a bit more about his life, like in Drive and the Samurai. They both live very Spartan lives. The job is the job, that's what they do. Nothing else going on. You see in Drive, Driver and Le Samurai not, but you see in Drive with Ryan Gosling's character that he probably tried to be legit for a while. Like, he was like a stunt driver, right? Like, he worked in, like, TV and movies or something, didn't he? It was just like he just wasn't making enough to get by. So it was more like he moonlighted as a getaway driver. Whereas the other guys, like, that was their job. Like, it's even said in this movie, like, there's a part where the detective confronts him and he says, look at your life, no steady job, no girlfriend, no, a few different things. So it's pretty clear, this is what he does. Just like the same thing as the Spartan life that Le Samurai led, that was the job. He lived in that one, that shitty little apartment with the bird, and that was his life. He had the job, and that was it. His only real relationship was with that guy that would help him change the license plates. And even he got fed up at the end, because one of the times he said, "This is the last time," by the way. Yeah. So that's another major difference, I think, in Drive is they go out of their way to humanize the character a little more, show that he does have other parts of his life, show that he does have compassion. So I definitely don't think you would think of Ryan Gosling's character as any kind of sociopath. You think of him more as a guy that's been sort of backed into a corner that we understand. And even though he does take vicious revenge, not everybody's going to do that, but it's still something that we can empathize with. Even if yourself wouldn't do it, you'd be like, yeah, I get why he would, though.
Well, I mean, he's killing horrible people. It's not like you feel sorry for the people he's killing.
Right.
And but yeah,
but
he
in this
was
movie,
like,
the only people hurt are people that try to kill him first. So yeah.
Wasn't he a stunt driver and also like a race car driver?
Yeah, something like I said, like he had like a legitimate job. It was just, I think the work kind of dried up for him, and that's, to make ends meet, he started doing this sort of on the side.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in The Driver and the Samurai, like that is their job. That is what they do. They don't have a legitimate job. They don't have anything else going on in their life. This is it. But I don't buy him as a sociopath in Driver either. I just think he's just a sort of one of those really detached individuals.
Mm.
The Samurai, I mean, just by the fact of giving it that title, makes it clear that the guy, while he does kill people for a living, he has a moral code that he lives by. The Driver's more subtle about it, but you get it off right thing, where he talks about no guns, and then when he talks about like how he doesn't like their methods and things like that, how he does not rise to any of the bait that the detective throws at him. He stays calm and composed. So I don't really think of that as sociopathic. I just think that's just sort of a very sort of calm, rational individual.
I agree.
Because you definitely don't have to be a sociopath to commit crimes. There's all sorts of reasons to commit crimes. I'm not saying that makes it okay and you shouldn't go to jail, but yeah. Yeah, I need to see Drive again because it's been a while. For some reason, I thought I owned it, but I don't. I did a thorough check. I don't own it. That's weird. For some reason, I have like a memory of like having the Blu-ray like here in my apartment, but I don't know.
I don't think I own it either. I've seen it a lot of times though.
Yeah. See, I don't think the Driver, ONeal's character, does usually carry a gun. Like, I don't think it. I think he just does because after after Teeth attacks him and threatens him with the gun, he realizes I'm going to need one. And it turns out to be absolutely true when Glasses tries to betray him.
All these films we've seen recently, I'm getting confused.
Yeah. And like I said, I think that's one of the things that separates again in Drive is they're all basically the same character type in that they're very pragmatic. They're very dispassionate. But they make a departure for that in Drive with Ryan Gosling because maybe for the first time in a while, he's found somebody to really care about. And that's made him, a little less like what he was, right? Like now he has this girl, now he has this woman and this kid that he cares about. He's lost this guy who was kind to him. So it's changed him. And maybe it's made him a little less smart because now he's more emotional. Because these are all characters who are not emotional. But in the case of Drive, stuff happens to him that has made him emotional because of what's happened. And so suddenly he's not quite the passionless, super efficient guy. Now he's being driven more by emotion than pragmatism. So, yeah, I think that's why, he goes about his vengeance on those guys in the way he does. And why maybe he wasn't smart enough to think about the gun. Because maybe he's not thinking clearly. Because maybe for the first time in his life or for a long time, like, his thoughts are actually finally being clouded by emotion. Right? Mm-hmm. But that's not something that happens really in The Driver at all. Because you have to remember, The Samurai ends with the character kind of sacrificing himself.
Right.
Whereas both Drive, I mean, he doesn't die in Drive, right? He gets away. Can't even remember. But Drive and The Driver, he doesn't die. He gets away. And I don't think The Driver had any plans to or not plans. I mean, it seemed to me like in The Samurai, he was resigned to his fate. He's like, I'm, in full view of everybody, I'm going to pull out my gun and, seem to like I'm going to shoot this woman. So the cops will have no choice but to kill me. Because he felt like that was really the only way out. Whereas there was another option for the guys in Drive and Driver. But yeah, I guess it is more clear to think that he's playing dumb at the end of Driver when he says, I guess we both got screwed over. That no, like he did something, he planned something, he did something so that he wouldn't wind up with the money, so the cop couldn't get him. Like he says to the cop, "Oh, I'm as surprised as you are. I guess I got betrayed, but probably not." because he's always been a step ahead of the cops throughout the whole thing. So to have the idea that like, no, he didn't, like, let's say, yeah, like he meant to have the money. Well, then if he meant to have the money, then he totally would have been arrested. And it would have meant that the cop outmaneuvered him. So I guess that isn't believable, because the whole point is he's outmaneuvering the cop literally in the cars, but also just like in the way he's planning and executing. So, yeah.
But yeah, it's really one that's it's not really a lot there to discuss, honestly.
No, I mean, it really helps to have those other movies to compare it to, really,
right,
which was what we've had to talk about for the last few minutes. Because yeah, it's really a staple of the kind of filmmaking that Hill is known for, which is kind of like very kind of straightforward, no nonsense filmmaking. He's not a guy that's necessarily concerned with atmosphere. If it happens, it happens, Because one of the things that made, a movie like The Samouraï longer than this movie's like a tight 91 minutes, is like there's some stuff happens fairly slowly in The Samouraï, which I'm sure some people think maybe the pacing's a bit slow, but you and I both enjoyed because we said it builds atmosphere. This movie moves at a quicker pace and it's not really about building atmosphere. And again, I don't mind that because I don't like to criticize movies for things they're not even trying to do. Like, I don't think this movie tried to convey atmosphere and failed. I think it was just trying to tell a fairly tight story in a very efficient way, and that's what it did. It was more about, the cause and effect and following this chain of events. It wasn't necessarily about relationships. It wasn't necessarily about atmosphere. So to me, that's perfectly fine. And that's, really just kind of the way Walter Hill makes his movies. It's funny. Sometimes, even though he's really good at it, Spielberg, who is really great at creating emotion and stuff like that, sometimes more cynical people will even come down and see Spielberg and say, well, sometimes I think he's overly sentimental. You'll never accuse Walter Hill of being overly sentimental, because that is not how he tells stories. That is not how he makes movies. So,
did he do Vigilante also? Was that Walter Hill?
What year was that?
I want to say 80s. 82.
I'm going to take a quick look at his... No,
that's William Lustig. My bad.
Okay. I was going to take a look at his filmography to see exactly the stuff he did direct. So Hard Times was the first movie he directed, and The Driver was the second. And The Hard Times, The Driver, and The Warriors were his first three movies. Mm-hmm. He directed and wrote all of them. And then he did The Long Riders, which is a Western that I've always really wanted to see. That's 1980. And I was thinking about that recently because I remember we talked about how I looked up a list of movies that had like greatest gunfights in it, and Long Riders appeared on a few of those lists. So that's made me interested. Plus, I had recently watched the assassination of Jesse James with a coward, Robert Ford, which is the same story as The Long Riders, except it's more about just the end, whereas The Long Riders starts earlier. But anyway, I'd like to see that movie. So, so that's what he did in 1980. He didn't write that one, though. But once again, he was the writer and director of Southern Comfort. Yeah, I had my timeline mixed up. Southern Comfort is 81. For some reason, I was thinking it was 70s. I think it's because it's set in 1974. I think it's set in 1974. But for some reason, that made me think that's when it came out. But yeah, so I was a little mixed up on my timeline there. Southern Comfort actually came out after these movies. 48 Hours... was a good success, and a lot of people like. I guess I need to see it again. I've never cared for it. Streets of Fire in 84, which I'm a big fan of, but was kind of a failure, and I get why. Never seen Brewster's Millions, which is like a comedy, right?
Oh, yeah, that's Richard Pryor.
Yeah, never seen it. Yeah, so these middle movies I did not see. Did not see Brewster's Millions, did not see Crossroads, did not see... I don't think I've ever even heard of Extreme Prejudice. Extreme Prejudice, 1987, a neo-Western action film starring Nick Nolte and Powers Booth.
Sporting it's a good movie.
Michael Irons. It sounds interesting. Oh, Rip Torn's in there, too. That sounds cool. I didn't know he did another Western. And another one of his unknown movies that people don't talk about is I like Last Man Standing.
Oh, 96. Bruce Willis?
Yeah. And I realize a lot of people think that movie is a dud, and I get why. Also, it's another one of those movies where I just mentioned how by the time the movie started and ended, everybody's like, nothing's really changed. It's the same thing in Last Man Standing. Bruce Willis's character does all this stuff, but by the time the movie's over, he's like gained nothing. And of course, Last Man Standing is another movie that has like a long history of like remakes, and that you know, Last Man Standing is kind of based on Yojimbo, the Akira Kurosawa film, which already had another Western, which was, you know, A Fistful of Dollars. So this is kind of like the third version of that story. But I always kind of like Last Man Standing. I saw it while I was in Mexico on my Mexico trip. It was just on some like movie channel or something at a hotel I was on. And I don't know. I get why people don't like it and think of it sort of a lesser movie as probably as a Walter Hill movie or a Bruce Willis movie. His character has like no personality whatsoever in that movie. He's like a blank slate. But I've always kind of liked that movie anyway.
I don't know that I've seen that since I saw it in the theater, and I hadn't seen Yojimbo or anything, but at that point, so I probably do need to revisit it.
Oh, you know who the sheriff was in that movie? Bruce Dern.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah. Wow. I knew that Christopher Walken was in it. He was like a mob enforcer.
I don't remember anything. I don't remember any of that. I remember it being like really was it black and white, or was it just really the color was really blown out in it?
Color is just really blown out. It's an interesting movie because it's like a hybrid between a gangster movie and a Western. Mm-hmm. Because basically it's set during the era of gangster movies, like it would have been like the 30s, but it's set down in like the Southwest. Right. So even though it would have been after the Old West, so it's weird. So yeah, it's like in like a southwestern town in the 30s, but like big city gangsters are there. And that's who, like the gang he fights are like that. And one of their main enforcers is this guy played by Christopher Walken, who like just whispers all his lines. Anyway, yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't really have much good to say about his work really in the 90s beyond that, but yeah. And as we said, he did do the Stallone film Bullet to the Head. It says 2012 here. I thought it was 2013, which is a good enough movie. It's an entertaining watch. You're not going to get much out of that, but yeah, his early output is really good. And so I will eventually watch Hard Times, but the one that's really on my list right now is The Long Riders. I really want to see that. It's interesting too, because, you know, it's a movie that's about some real life brothers, and he used real life brothers in the casting. Stacy Keach and his brother are in that.
Oh wow, I didn't realize Stacy Keach had an acting brother.
Yeah, I don't think I did either. It's kind of funny.
What film was that?
This is The Long Riders. It's a movie about the James Gang. But yeah, his brother is James Keith. Oh yeah, and it had the Carradines too, David and Keith Carradine.
Oh, that's cool.
And Robert Carradine's in there. But anyway, yeah, they're all cast like as brothers, which is kind of
David, Keith, and Robert are in there. Wow. Yep.
It's also Dennis Quaid is in there.
Randy Quaid. Randy was in it, man. Lots of brothers.
I was gonna say, yeah, he cast brothers. Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Awesome.
But anyway, yeah. So I was thinking about that movie recently because I saw it on that list of like gun battle stuff, and I was like, oh yeah, that's about the James Gang, and I just watched a movie about the James Gang. So
I've never seen this, but it looks awesome. Like Christopher Guest and his brother.
Mm-hmm. And I did see one of the gun scenes because on the list they had like a YouTube clip of it, and it was really cool. It's like some sort of bank robbery gone wrong or something, but they're just riding down the street and everybody's shooting. It looks really cool. So yeah, that's definitely the next like Walter Hill movie I want to check out.
I haven't seen this. I'm gonna have to watch this soon.
Walter Hill has a quote saying something like, basically all his movies are Westerns, whether or not they take place in that setting or not. Like they follow those beats and act that way. Makes a certain amount of sense. Yeah, so James Keach actually plays Jesse, which is pretty interesting because like he's kind of like one of the unknown of the brother. One of the more unknown of the actors would have been James Keach, and yet Jesse James is like the main guy, with Stacy as Frank. And the Carradines played the Youngers, Cole, Jim, and Bob. The Quaids played the Millers, and holy shit, Christopher Guest's brother too.
Yeah,
Nicholas Guest. They played the Fords. Oh yeah, that's right. I knew about the Fords. The only brothers I knew about were the James and the Fords. I don't think I knew about Youngers and Millers. Anyway, yeah. So that remains like the really big project for me to check out for Walter Hill. Says I've always been a fan of his movies, and there were a few gaps I had. I hadn't seen Southern Cover, but now I've seen Southern Cover. But yeah, that's really been on my radar lately because of that list and because of watching the other Jesse James movie. And that scene I saw was pretty cool too. So yeah, definitely want to check that out. I mean, Walter Hill, of course, is all over the place as a producer too. He's produced some of the Alien films, including the original. Yeah, he's a producer on pretty much every Alien film, including Prometheus, whether you count that or not. And for some reason, he's a producer on Demon Knight and Bordello of Blood. So at some point, he got involved with the Tales from the Crypt people, I guess.
Mm.
Ah, well, that's what we were just saying, how we hadn't seen it, and we both really want to see it, and how lately I was really thinking about it. We did a show on The Proposition, if you're not aware, Jacob, so you can look for that on the channel.
Jacob that's probably why he brought it up.
Yeah.
Probably why he brought it up.
Yeah. I really like The Proposition. Mm-hmm. I actually own it. That's why I picked it to do a show on, which we did a year or two ago. But yeah, so The Long Riders is something that's really a priority for me now, because they've been popping up in things I was looking at. What do you think is the best driving in this movie? I think the best driving is actually saved for the end. I also like how it is kind of an interesting flip, because obviously he's a getaway driver, but for the end stuff, he's doing the chasing. I kind of liked that, shows that he's just as good as like doing the chasing as being chased. Just kind of an interesting sort of inversion of his usual things. I mean, it kind of stands to reason. If you're a good getaway driver, you can probably chase people down pretty well too. But I don't know. I just kind of enjoyed that kind of reversal.
Yeah, I mean, I like the parking garage because that's really tight quarters. Even though he does tear that car up, but he kind of does it on purpose.
Yeah, he does. It's kind of a weird point to make, really, because they say, "How do we know you're that good?" He demonstrates his skill by, really successfully getting around all the pillars and stuff like that. They believe him, and then he goes out of his way to like mess up the car just because he's mad that they asked the question, I guess.
Right. He also goes and knocks all of the like water faucets. I don't know some covers on some water faucets.
Yeah.
Water spigots, whatever you call those. With the side view mirror, I believe, is what he uses to do that with.
Yeah. Some good precision driving. People always talk about the term defensive driving. Was what he does offensive driving? It's pretty aggressive. Because and twice in the movie he uses chicken. In the opening scene and the opening chase, when he has the two cops coming at him, he plays chicken and splits them. And that's how he gets away at the very end of that. And of course, that's how he takes out Teeth and his drivers. He plays chicken with him near the warehouse. He's just got, ice water running through his veins, as they say. Chicken might be a simple concept, but very difficult to pull off. You have to really have guts. But he does it twice, and twice the other guy blinks.
Right. It kind of becomes his thing.
Yeah. I can't remember if that's done in Drive. It's been too long. I forget a lot of Drive. I remember the opening stuff pretty well because it's very similarly. He's doing a getaway and it's dark and he turns off the lights a few times and zips around and he's listening to the cops. And I remember there's a part where it's during the daytime and he's on like a highway outside the city. I remember that chase a bit too, but other stuff I'm fuzzy on. So that's another thing. Le Samouraï takes place, I guess, in Paris. This shifts it to L.A.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure Drive takes place in and around L.A., more or less. And as Hill said, like one thing that hadn't really been done with car chase movies to that point was they didn't really show chases at night. There weren't too many like nighttime chases, and he really wanted that to be a big part of it. So that's when the chases happen. Yeah,
they're all at night.
Yeah, they're all at night. Don't bite me.
I was thinking about this earlier. Some police, like if they would confiscate like in a drug thing, they confiscated like a sports car, like a Lamborghini or Ferrari or something.
Yeah.
Like sometimes they would take that and they would like turn that into a police car.
Yeah.
And use that, but There was this one guy I remember. He would wear night vision goggles, and he had like a Lamborghini, and he would that's how he would traffic drugs. He would just be completely dark, in the darkness, and that's how he would do it. And they caught him and they confiscated his vehicle.
Huh.
I finally caught him somehow, but not a very big trunk for drugs. A Lamborghini.
No, not really. But I mean, I guess speed is the main draw there. And of course, I mean, I know you've probably seen footage of remember about 10 or some years ago, there was a guy that dressed all in black, and he didn't even commit robberies. All he did was just speed and fuck with the cops. He was on a motorcycle. You ever see footage of him? Oh, we can find it. It's on some of those shows, and you can see it on YouTube. There's this guy. He never actually committed crimes. He just wanted to go as fast as he could. So he was zipping around on like a souped up motorcycle at crazy speeds. And the cops would try to catch him, and they never could because he was just too fast. And he used to, I think he filmed himself a bit too and sent the tapes. I don't know. But he didn't actually commit crimes beyond just, speeding and reckless endangerment and stuff like that. And I don't know if they ever caught him. Because it's funny. I mean, somewhat ironically, I don't know, Ryan Gosling would be in that movie, The Place Beyond the Pines, where he plays another stunt driver who gets pulled into the idea of doing robberies because he can outmaneuver the cops on a bike. It's a pretty good movie. I like it.
Yeah, I like that movie too. Doesn't he have a lot of weird tattoos all over him?
Yeah. Because he worked in a circus and he was do crazy stunt stuff on the bike. Yeah, I forgot to make that comparison. There's a lot of, if you're going to make that comparison about characters again, the Thief character that, the hell is that in Thief?
Damn it.
Because that's one of the things I don't like about Thief is I don't like him.
You don't like the guy.
I don't think it works. Shit, I better check.
Walter Matthau. Bald white guy.
It's I know who it is. It's James Caan.
James Caan.
Right. Because there's a lot of Thief has a lot in common with this movie as far as he's sort of a similar guy and he's got a specialized skill, and when people fuck with him, he gets mad about it and stuff like that. For me, that's a great movie, except I don't like James Caan. James Caan ruined it for me. I don't buy him as that character, especially in the scenes where he is tough. There's a part where they're threatening him and he beats them up. I just don't buy it. I don't buy James Caan as a guy that can beat anybody up or threaten anybody or menace anybody or seem remotely intimidating. I just don't buy it. So I really like Thief. It's a really well-constructed movie. It's a really stylish movie. I just wish it was somebody else. He doesn't ruin it. What's that?
Sonny's kind of intimidating. The Godfather?
Yeah, I guess. I don't again, it doesn't ruin it. I just kind of wish it was somebody else. And I like James Caan and lots of stuff. Obviously, Misery is my favorite thing for James Caan, but I don't know. I've never liked that casting. I've always found James Caan in Thief is really off-putting. It keeps me from really liking the movie because I like the style, I like the story, It's Michael Mann, really doing his thing well. I like Thief. I just don't like the character because I don't like James Caan. He just does not seem right for it.
I think Thief is probably my favorite of his films, honestly, because I have problems with pacing in a lot of his films, but if he directed The Driver, it would be 3 hours long.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm not really much of a Michael Mann fan. I mean, I like Heat because kind of everybody does. I think Heat is great. And we've talked a lot about Manhunter and Manhunter versus Red Dragon. I think Red Dragon is superior, but there's a lot I find I like about Manhunter. Outside of that, I don't really care for his movies. I mean, a lot of people really like Last of the Mohicans. It's never made much of an impression on me.
Me either.
I really dislike Collateral. I really dislike Miami Vice. I really dislike Public Enemies. Public Enemies is a movie I really want to like. It's just boring as hell.
I haven't seen it.
You'll probably be bored to tears.
Johnny Depp?
Yeah. I mean, it's another movie. It looks really great. It's got good actors in it. It's really slick looking. It's just boring. I don't know. I saw it in theaters. Only saw it once. I found a real chore to sit through, and I was disappointed because I was looking forward to it because I wanted to see Johnny Depp as like this slick '30s gangster, John Dillinger. But
yeah, I mean it's a cool premise, but
I mean, I'm not saying don't watch it. I'm just saying I found it boring, and I feel like you would too. But I don't know. I never saw Ali. He did Ali, the Muhammad Ali movie with Will Smith. I heard that that's like got a lot of like problems as far as being realistic or being like true to history. That was Will Smith like in his like really wants an Oscar kind of period.
I guess that's still Will Smith.
The early to mid 2000s, Will Smith's like, all right, I've been your like funny action guy in Wild Wild West and Men in Black, but now I'm going to be serious. And I'm not saying he shouldn't be, and I'm not saying he can't be a good serious actor, but it just felt kind of really obvious what he was chasing with some of those roles. But so I would not actually call myself a fan of Michael Mann. He has not done enough that I like. Thief is an excellent movie for a first movie, though. You gotta give him credit for that. Like, that's his first movie. That's a really great movie to be your first movie. But I mean, I guess my favorite is Heat, which is kind of cliche because it's most people's, and I really do like Heat, which of course was on the list I was talking about of great shootouts. I mean, that is one of the really good movie shootouts. But yeah, no, I would not actually call myself a Michael Mann fan or man or. It's Michael Mann? Just Mann, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I was saying like Mann.
I don't know how it's pronounced.
For some reason, on his Wikipedia page, they actually have a list of his favorite movies. Some really great movies. What's interesting is he mentioned The Wild Bunch by Sam Peckinpah. Now, Sam Peckinpah, he's kind of one of the early guys, if you want to talk about like cool gun violence in movies. He's one of the very first because he was doing it in the 60s. In some ways, if you look at like Walter Hill's career, it almost looked like Walter Hill was trying to like emulate Sam Peckinpah. I mean, The Wild Bunch is his big one, but I mean, think of like movies. His movies really were some of the early movies. We talked back when we did the New Hollywood, and we said how, of course, one of the things they could do with New Hollywood was now movies could be more violent. Like Sam Peckinpah is one of the guys that took that and ran with that because I mean he did The Wild Bunch, which was much more violent than like westerns before that, and of course he did a movie that might be worth doing. I don't know. They made a remake of it a few years ago. That's not too bad either. Straw Dogs, which of course the whole point of Straw Dogs is about violence, right?
Yeah, I like Straw Dogs. It's
a very edgy, real movie. So yeah, I think in some ways, I think that Walter Hill definitely saw like. Sam Peckinpah is a guy he'd want to sort of like take after and emulate. Yeah, I need to see the original Straw Dogs again. It's been a few years since I've seen it. The remake's not terrible. It's okay.
I haven't seen it.
It's kind of unnecessary.
As most of those are.
Yeah. But I mean, it's pretty well done.
The Originals is such a sleazy movie.
Yeah. I mean, they don't gloss it over. I guess that's probably the best thing I'd say about the remake, is the remake doesn't like try to pretty it up or anything. It does follow that. It's interesting. It's got James Marsden, who hasn't like aged in the last decade. I was thinking about James Marsden because he actually plays Stu Redmond in what I've been watching recently, which is the CBS adaptation of The Stand. Which I won't go into the whole thing, but I'll just say short version is I'm mostly disappointed because I don't like how they're telling the story out of sequence. I'm a big fan of movies where you can jump around in time and do flashbacks and stuff like that. I think that can be done really well. I don't think it works for The Stand. I think The Stand, you just have to let it build. Just start at the beginning and go forward. I feel like you're really undercutting a lot of like powerful moments and stuff by showing things way too soon. I'm on episode 5. I think there's 9 or 10. I will finish it. I don't hate it because I still really love The Stand. It's one of my favorite books. It's one of my favorite stories, period. But I do feel let down. James Marsden's not a bad Stu Redmond, though he's kind of prettier than I always imagined Stu Redmond to be. Stu Redmond was kind of supposed to be more of like an everyman. I think James Marsden's a little too pretty for that, but not a big deal. The casting is okay, I guess, but I won't go down. But The Stand is just super important to me. It's one of my favorite books of all time. It's influenced me as a writer like most of my life, I've just been trying to write a novel like The Stand, which I'll probably never do. But I just love a big sprawling narrative about a big thing going on.
I agree with that, Jacob.
Yeah. Well, we're on the same page because you also thought Public Enemies was boring. Yeah. Like Public Enemies, what's interesting about Public Enemies, of course, is it's about Dillinger, who's had an interesting career. And the point is he intersected with the career of another well-known gangster of that era, Babyface Nelson, right? I think they even worked together. Babyface Nelson appears in that movie, and as soon as you watch the scenes of Babyface Nelson, you're just like, they should have just made the movie about him, because stuff would have actually happened. Because the big difference between Babyface Nelson and Dillinger was kind of like a Robin Hood to a lot of, whether he didn't give the money to the poor or anything, but the public liked him because he was a snappy dresser, he was polite, and he didn't hurt people. Whereas Nelson was like crazy and shot whoever got in his way. So you can understand why that would make kind of more of an entertaining movie. But there is a really good scene where I think they worked a job together, something like that, and the cops are chasing them, and Nelson's like, I don't even know who they got to play him, but he was good. And he was like ranting and raving about like how those damn coppers weren't going to get him, and he was firing his Tommy gun. It was great, but it's only a tiny section of what is a very boring movie. I should look up who played him in that. But yeah, I saw that in the theater because I was looking forward to it. But Stephen Graham played Babyface Nelson. It's not a name that leaps off, but I'm sure I know who it is. Marion Cotillard is in that. She's one of my favorite actresses of the last few years, but again, just a very boring movie. Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot about Walter Hill. I don't think there's much more to add. And people who didn't know before know that, yeah, he's one of my favorite directors who I think is kind of underrated. And I've talked about him in a few different shows. And I know we did an episode on the Sausage Factory years ago where specifically each of us were going to pick a director who we thought was underrated. He was my pick, so I talked about him there too. And at that time, there were several of his movies I hadn't even seen. And I'm still remedying that. And as I said, well, I'll try to get Fighting the Long Riders because it looks really cool. And it's kind of been in my brain lately anyway. Now, apparently this movie, the original cut of this movie was 2 hours and actually had an additional action scene, but it wasn't a chase scene. It was something else. And there was a rumor for a long time that there was like a director's cut that was like that, but Walter Hill has basically denied that and said, like, no, like nobody made him cut it or anything like the 90-minute cut is what he wanted. So there's not going to be some sort of director's cut release of that at any point. He's always said that was never his intended cut. And he just said that anybody saying like anybody saying like the extended cut even exists is just an urban myth. So no, according to Hill himself, there is no like 2 hour cut of this movie, and the 2 hour cut would not have been his intended vision anyway. That he's perfectly happy with the movie as it is.
Yeah, apparently it was someone else like had a pretty sizable role in the cut footage.
Yeah, I couldn't find details on it. Just that he said that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm fine with it the way it is. I think the length doesn't hurt it.
No, I think it's a good sort of tight movie. We're saying like Walter Hill's thing is sort of like efficiency, right? We're following these things, and it doesn't have stuff like drive. It's not about an emotional journey that the guy's on. He's not going to take a detour and fall in love with somebody or anything like that. Like that's not this story.
Yeah, you do kind of think that he's going to fall in love with. What is it? The player.
The player. And I mean, it's another thing they kind of leave ambiguous because
because that's
maybe they hook up afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Maybe. But the movie is, again, it's not about that. It's not about making a point that always falling in love with this woman. Because at the end of the day, you find out, why did she? Totally agree with that because I was just looking her up and I was just like, yeah, she's not in too many great movies lately, but because she says, because, it's like, oh, why didn't, when he got called in, why did she say, it wasn't him? Oh, it's because he paid her off. It's not because she liked him or was curious about him. It's because he paid her. And again, it's another one of those movies that's ambiguous. We know that we don't even know what she does, but when the detective's talking to her and says, "Well, I looked into you," he alludes to the fact that she has like some sort of criminal history. You know, she's been, even though she's young, he says, "You're 22, but you've been around the block." So he says, like, you've been involved with criminal activity before. So she's kind of pragmatic herself. You know, it's not an emotional thing. It's not a love story or anything like that. You know, I don't think the movie would have been improved by a scene where they talk about their feelings or have sex or anything. Like, no, it's not what's being told here. I'm looking at the roles. So we have the driver, the detective, and the player. The connection is the woman, you know, that he uses to set up jobs. Somebody's called the red plainclothes man, the gold plainclothes man. I guess those are cops. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, you've got the other gang he worked with, which were Glasses and Teeth. Mm-hmm. I believe the kid was the driver, but I'm not sure. And, of course, there's Exchange Man at the end. I don't remember who Fingers is supposed to be, or Split, or Frizzy. Then there's some card man, and then you got Blue Mask and Green Mask, who were the guys that pulled the robbery at the start. So those are the official names of our characters. He wrote an original screenplay over the summer of '75, in between the period when Hard Times was made and was released. He wanted to see how pure a film he could make, a genre film that did not conform itself in conventional Hollywood ways. So that's kind of what we're talking about, right? Like, it's not about following those beats. Oh, now you meet the girl and you're going to fall in love and you're going to try to fight your way out to get a new start with the girl. It's like, no, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, surviving, escaping arrest. And if she can help me, she can help me. So it is against convention in that way, for sure. He wrote it as a very tight script, which is true. It's a very tight movie, 90 minutes. Not a moment wasted, very efficient. This is not meant to be an everyday action movie. I was trying to do something a little more or a little less, but I was trying to do something else. Minimalistic style, blah, 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 blah. And just some stuff about the casting, which we already talked about, how they wanted to get different people. He was actually contacted by ONeal's agent. We talked about the role and talked about the minimalist approach I wanted to try. He felt he could do it and we just got comfortable with each other. ONeal complimented the filmmaker as a force to be reckoned with, as a first-rate writer and even better director, and he's fast. Most young directors today think they are David Lean. They spend over a year on film, and we get robots that talk. David Lean, of course, is the famous British director who did Lawrence of Arabia. And so when I was talking about epics, another one he did was Dr. Zhivago. You know, these are long, wordy movies, and you know that is kind of the opposite, like we said, of Hill. Hill's great to define. As I said, he's not sentimental like a Spielberg, and he's certainly not wordy like a David Lean. He's a get in and get out, you know, make your action type thing, type of guy. I have a quote here from the actress, but it doesn't matter. Ajani. She compares him to Howard Hawks, which is kind of cool. In the tradition of Howard Hawks, lean and spare. The story is contemporary, but also very stylized. The roles that Ryan and I play are like Bogart and Bacall. I mean, I guess they are, but again, it's kind of like Bogart and Bacall, but like stripping away some of that Hollywood convention, because, you know, you take the romance right out of it. Because I'm a big fan of stylistic movies and romantic movies, but that's not what this is. And I applaud it for that. At one point, Robert Mitchum was up for the role of the detective. That could have worked. I mean, he would have been a bit old, but I mean, I don't mind him being... I mean, he wouldn't have been super old. I mean, Robert Mitchum is definitely older than Bruce Dern. Robert Mitchum having died quite a while ago. Right. Bruce Dern still being with us. But yeah, that Mercedes that he beats up was a Mercedes 250S. Kind of a cool. It's kind of unfortunate because it's one of the cooler looking cars. It's like this bright yellow. It's a Mercedes, and like it doesn't actually get used for like a job. He just beats the hell. He just drives around and beats the hell out of it. But I assume that's kind of the point, right? He's making this point with these guys, these robbers, that he doesn't like their style.
At the end, one of the other driver has the Camaro, I believe, with the fancy paint job.
Yeah, and he managed to take him out with a pickup truck.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like he picked the truck. The truck was just the truck that Glasses had. He just took it after he killed Glasses. Yeah. But I mean, that's sort of the point. Like, he's a driver. he can make anything work, right? You know, put him behind the wheel of whatever, he'll make it work. Yeah, but as I said, I think as much as I talk about the other stuff in action movies, especially like martial arts and fighting and gunfighting, the part that sometimes does get overlooked, I think, is like vehicle chases. But I'm a big fan of that too. I really appreciate that sort of stunt work. It takes a lot of talent and it takes a lot of guts. I always think it would have been cool. Like, how do you become a stunt driver? Like, there must be a way to like practice and be taught. I mean, I can't take a car and go to a parking lot and just zip around and do whatever I want. The cops are going to find out about it and get mad at me.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess practice somehow.
There might, I would assume in a place like around LA, being, you know, what it is, there are probably some schools.
Yeah. Now, yeah.
Yeah. Back then, I don't know. But yeah, the life of a stuntman is an interesting one, whether you're a driver or whatever. But I always like to be able to shine a light on that because sometimes I think they get overlooked. Like, they're the ones actually doing it. It's not the star. I mean, sometimes the stars do stunts, and that's cool, but they can't always. And as it's been pointed out, it's not just because they're, you know, wusses or anything like that. It's because, you know, if the star gets a twisted ankle or something, that shuts down production until they're back. And that's why you use stunt people, even when it's for stuff that a star could do themselves. It's just because, you know, if the stunt person gets hurt, well, you can get a different stunt person. But if the star gets hurt, you can't really replace them. So that's why. It's not just, oh, these stars are so delicate and they can't be, you know. And there's a lot of people out there that make a big deal of trying to do as many stunts as they can. Tom Cruise, to the point where it sounds like he's, you know, desperately overcompensating. Like, we get it, Tom. You've done stunts and you can do stunts, but you just go out of your way. Like, it feels like, yeah, you're trying to prove something that you don't need to prove. It's proven, Tom.
Well, it's stupid. It's stupid for the star power to be doing the stunts. It's dumb.
Okay, yeah, because he does put productions at risk if he does get hurt, right?
Not necessary. I mean, yeah, you know, the fact that COVID does exist is damaging the movie, and also you're doing stunts is damaging the movie as well, or potentially damaging the movie.
Yeah.
You know.
Plus, he's getting older. Even if he doesn't look it, he is getting older.
Nice.
But I mean, it's always cool when stars can do stunts here and there, of course. I mean, it always makes things look better. You know, Harrison Ford did stunts where he could.
Well, it's more like bragging rights than anything, right? I mean, you know, why else would it matter? Like, who cares? You know, it would have looked the same. Yeah. It's not like
except your face was... every once in a while it doesn't, though, right? Every once in a while you'll see a movie where it's like really bad how they did it. It's like some stunt person in a wig. You know,
they could find some 4'11" man to go do Tom Cruise's stunts.
Exactly. I always liked how since one of the few movies that I always watched extra footage of since I had the big set and stuff was the Lord of the Rings stuff, how they had various doubles for the hobbits who were people actually of that size for those shots. Some of them were little people, but some of them were actually, I think, kids too. Because I'm pretty sure at least the one that was doubling for Mary, that's Dominic Monaghan or whatever his name is, like I think his double was just like a kid. It was fun how they like hung out on set. But yeah, it's like because like there's that shot like really early on at the very beginning where Gandalf first comes to the Shire and has this, and you've got Frodo coming up to him saying, "Hello, you're late," and stuff. Like it's a shot. It's, you know, that's digital. You know, it's the kid or whoever it is, but then they digitally put Elijah Wood's face on him, but it looks good because Elijah Wood is not 3'9". Those kind of brought epics back, I guess, to a little extent. That trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
It was really something watching the Justice League Snyder Cut and like realizing like I'm like, wow, like Return of the King would have been over by now, and this is still going. Although Return of the King, the director's cut is like 4 hours. And this really is. I mean, I counted it like precisely because I mean, I don't know how they got the credits so slow. Because okay, if you look up Avengers Endgame, right, it says 3 hours, blah 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 blah. But like almost 20 minutes of that is credits. Whereas with the just Justice League cut, it's like half that, because the movie's actual runtime is 3 hours 54 minutes, like of the actual movie, and then like with credits, it's like 4:05 or something like that. So that's like a lot shorter credits. But that movie did win me over to a certain extent because of just how much better like the final stuff is. The whole like actual attack of going to, you know, go after the bad guys and get them other boxes away from what's his name, Steppenwolf. Like that is like such incomprehensible, terrible looking bullshit in the theatrical cut. Like the sky is like this awful red. Everything looks stupid. You can't tell what people are doing. Batman kind of disappeared from the action. Like all that is done like 100 times better in this cut. So I'll say that at least. So if anybody doesn't want to like invest all that time, the movie is in 6 parts and an epilogue. If you just jump and watch from part 6, which is just around 3:02, and just watch that, you can be satisfied. Because it's hard to recommend watching all 4 hours of a movie. Some people don't mind breaking movies up. They'll watch 2 hours here, then 2 hours. I can't do that. But anyway, I guess I'm glad. I never planned to watch it this soon, but I don't know. It was there, and it just kept itching in my brain that I should watch it. So I did, and yeah. It's funny, though, like, how much better do I think it is? Like, if it was on Letterboxd, I gave the original a 2.5 out of 5, and now I give this a 3. So I think it's a half a point better, or maybe it would be a 6 instead of a 5 out of 10. So
okay, I thought you would have said better than that. Okay.
No, because it still can't fix the problems that I have in the first place. I'm never going to get past Ben Affleck as Batman. Never. I can't. I'm never going to get past what's his name as Alfred, even. And I like Jeremy Irons, but he's a terrible Alfred. And he has even worse dialogue in this movie. There's a part, and I think it's even in the promos, you don't have to watch the movie, where he's like telling Batman, like, you know, about how dangerous it is to try to bring Superman back to life or something. Because if he does, the whole thing is like, if you're going to bring Superman back to life, they'd have to use one of the mother boxes. Very quickly, I'll say there's 3 mother boxes. And at this point, Steppenwolf has 2 of them. The only one left is the one they have. And the idea is they can keep it hidden if it's not activated. But to bring Superman back, they'd have to activate it, right? So that's the risk. It's like, we can try this. We don't even know if it'll bring Superman back. But once it's activated, Steppenwolf will know and he'll come. So Alfred says something like, if you can't bring down the charging bull, don't wave the red cape. Like, I wanted to, like, barf. That's terrible dialogue to come out of Alfred. I hated it. So there's kind of a lot of stuff like that in the movie. It's way better than the original cut, but it still doesn't solve the problems I have. So, and it still is overindulgent, like as you might expect for something that long. Like there's a part like early in the story where Aquaman is introduced, and there's a guy out in the ocean, and Aquaman rescues him. Okay, that's fine. Aquaman brings him back to the bar, and like takes a big drink of whiskey or whatever, and says it's on him. Okay, very funny. Then he leaves the bar to go back to the ocean. No problem. Except when he leaves the bar to go to the ocean, for one of the zillion times the movie goes into slow motion, he in slow motion walks out onto the dock with the stormy sea all around him while some pop song plays, and it takes like 8 hours. Okay, it doesn't, but it takes a long time, and you don't need it, but I get it. That's another reason why the movie is so long, because half of it is in slow motion. If it was in normal motion, the movie would be significantly shorter. But anyway, we're not going to do this. It would take too long. We can just wrap up on the driver and let that be that. I'll just say my verdict is it is better. And I guess I'm glad it happened, because it is nice to see somebody who was directing a movie basically had the movie taken away from them and completely changed and then released. You know, that's a sucky thing. So to see like him have his actual vision get released, that's nice.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm glad that happened. And of course, now everybody's screaming because that movie has this epilogue about like this crazy alternate future that we saw in the Superman. That was the Nightmare Batman thing, by the way. You know, this alternate future where somehow Lois Lane got killed. So Superman's gone all crazy and evil now, and the world's like a smoking hole. That's where the Joker stuff is, by the way. You can watch 99% of this movie and the Joker's not in it. He's at the epilogue. He's part of the epilogue in that world. So now all the people that had whined and cried for this movie to come out, now they're all going to whine and cry, say, keep the Snyderverse going. And DC has very quickly come down and said, no, this was a one-off. So the epilogue doesn't really mean anything, because they're not gonna continue. If they make a Justice League 2, it will follow the theatrical cut. It will not follow this in any way, shape, or form. But anyway,
I doubt they do a sequel. I don't know what they're going to do. I think they're really losing money on this, on the DCU.
It only cost $300 million. And then the cut to release the Snyder Cut cost another 20 to 25. So,
wow.
Anyway. Yes, Griffin, totally agree. We were talking about Steve McQueen, how like they actually wanted him for the role, but he thought it was too similar to The Getaway. And also, of course, he'd done the iconic thing in Bullet, which is really maybe one of the first really, truly iconic car chases in film. Bullet's like what, like 66? Something like that. Something like that. But yeah, I mean, they'll continue it in some way. They just won't continue this version. And a million people will freak out just like they did last time. Because they was like, I want to see, this Nightmare Batman. Like, I don't. Actually, I don't think you needed the epilogue at all. The movie could have just ended and had its tight 3 hours and 30 minutes. That's a half-hour long epilogue for like something that will never be addressed in the future. So
I may watch that. I may watch that part.
The epilogue?
Yeah.
It's mostly just a meandering conversation with the Joker that's not very good, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a good thing you watched it because it's only on there for a month, I think. And it's
really?
Off. Yeah.
Like, because then they're going to release it like as a Blu-ray?
I don't know. That's just what they do when they release it like that, like the early releases on HBO and Crave and stuff.
Huh. That's interesting. Well, I watched the first 2 hours, then I watched the first 2 hours again, and then I watched it all the way through. So I kind of got a lot out of it, I guess, which is kind of too bad because the second half is better than the first half. But anyway. They'll do something. They have to do something with again, not the Snyder Cut, but they have to do something with this universe they have created. I mean, they are making a sequel to Shazam. That's happening. So, but yeah,
I like Shazam.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's one of those movies. It's kind of like a Guardians of the Galaxy thing. Like a lot of people don't really know the characters anyway, and it's not going to be held to too high a standard. It's just more being fun.
Right.
Yeah, Shazam's pretty good.
Yeah, I agree, Jacob.
I mean, that's not how I felt, but in the end, I just got super curious, I guess, is what it was. Because, I mean, but it kind of isn't worth it because, yeah, I mean, it's definitely better than the original, but it still can't fix my main problems with it, All I can just tell the people, if you're curious, yes, it's better. And the end, and like the climax or whatever is way, way better. But, yeah. It definitely is long. It's been a long time since I watched anything that long, really long.
Well, what really just, I mean, we on the Sausage Factory when you watched Batman vs. Superman. I watched the first Superman the day before I went to the theater and watched Batman vs. Superman, and that really, like, I think I lost a bit of my life during that experience.
Yeah, I hate Batman vs. Superman so much. And it's another thing they fixed. So, like, okay, for those that remember, so remember in Batman versus Superman, there's that part, like, it's really stupid where Batman first, he says, like, tell me, do you bleed? Or like that, right? Everyone remembers that shit. In the Justice League theatrical cut, when Superman comes back to life and his memories are messed up, so he attacks them all, but his memories are still there that he remembers Batman, he, like, lifts him up to the air and, like, says it back to him. He's like, tell me, do you bleed? Or something like that. That is not in this cut at all. That does not happen. Superman still, comes back to life and attacks him at first, but that is different. And Lois just shows up, like, on her own. In the theatrical cut, it's like Batman had Alfred bring her, which is kind of stupid, really. It's like, I think she's in Metropolis. Everybody's, like, phone is blowing up saying, holy shit, like, it looks like Superman's back. Look, Superman's back. I think she's going to get there on her own. She doesn't need, like, Alfred to come get her. Anyway, there's a million things I could talk about, and let's not do it because it's actually not worth it, because I would agree with Jacob. I respect your decision because I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, no, you should watch it. Like, no, don't. Don't watch it. I'll never watch Suicide Squad. And to me, like, I think Suicide Squad's even worse. Like, there's no way a cut could redeem that, man. Yeah, I'm really on these.
Is there
DC
another
movies.
cut of that? They've released another cut of Suicide Squad?
I don't know. There's James Gunn and there's David Ayer. I don't know. I don't remember who did what anymore. I can't keep it straight.
David Ayer did it, right?
Yeah. Like that's another thing. Like, release the Ayer cut has come up now. It's like, what he did? Like did he do a longer cut? Like, was Suicide Squad originally 5 hours too? Are we can get one of that? You know.
Why do people keep calling for more cuts of shitty movies?
Anyway, but I mean, this is weird that it set the precedent in a way. It's like, what have you unleashed here by doing this? At least it was better, but that doesn't mean everything will be, or necessarily justifies all the time and effort. But anyway, people who don't know, I don't like David Ayer at all. I don't like anything he's done. Not a single thing. Nothing. So I don't need to see a David Ayer cut of anything. I don't like him as a filmmaker. Don't like his stuff.
Snyder Cut of Bright.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, I know this stuff is moving forward in some fashion, but I mean, the new Batman movie is not part of this, right? It's a completely new Batman. It's like another reboot. Looks really cool, actually. The Batman movie with Robert Pattinson. I really thought that was coming out this year. Nope, not till 2022. All these delays because of COVID. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing because 2020 was actually a really good year for horror films, but most of them didn't get much play at, a few select theaters, maybe.
Yeah. I didn't get to really see any of them. I mean, I saw The Invisible Man, which was okay.
I mean, with the exception of, On Demand, I've seen quite a few. I own a lot, like Dark and the Wicked is great. The Empty Man.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of those.
They're awesome, man. Those are both great. The Rental, Relic. Actually, I haven't seen The Rental yet. But
I was going to say, I think I have access to The Rental. I think that's on Crave or Stars or something.
I got that on Blu-ray. And Rent-A-Pal is supposed to be really good.
Okay. Hadn't heard of that.
And I've got a huge list of horror films I saw in the year that were pretty good, like Train to Busan sequel. I think the Peninsula is what it's called.
Huh.
What was the
I
other?
know some of these titles, but not all of them.
Korean zombie movie #Alive. I mean, stupid name, but
yeah, I've heard of that one. Yeah,
pretty good film. It was on U.S. Netflix at one point.
Yeah.
But that's unfortunate because it was a pretty good year for horror films, at least.
Yeah, I'd like to watch some horror again. It's been a while since I saw anything horror, probably. Can't really think of the last horror thing I saw. Nothing good. Probably just something bad. I'm going to watch it's funny when we were talking about remakes like last week. Actually, I haven't seen that one, Griffin, the Fury movie. I just never bothered with it because I figured I wouldn't like it. And I just really, Jay and I've talked about, like, none of us have really been in a war movie mode at all. Like, I've had lots of opportunity to watch Fury. I was just like, no. I always forget that's David Ayer, so it's possible I could see that and like it. But of all the movies by him that I've seen, I don't like any of them. Fury is mostly known for, like, what's his name, like, driving everybody nuts. Shia LaBeouf. Like, he didn't shower for 3 months to do that movie. Like, that's insanity, right? If he did 3 weeks, I'd say, okay, I get it. I think 3 weeks is plenty. 3 months? And he tried to, obviously it was not pleasant to be around as far as the smell went. And also several times he tried to goad Brad Pitt into a fist fight on set because he thought it would help their characters or something. I don't know. It was just, yeah. I mean, we've come to be used to those sorts of things from him. He's kind of a spectacle in himself, Shia LaBeouf. But yeah, that's the main thing I know about Fury. I've heard whether it's good or interesting. It was more of his antics on making the movie. Anyway. But I was going to say, when we were talking about, like, remakes the other day, and we were saying, are any remakes good or better? To say one that I actually like, of the many zillion of, like, remakes of horror movies they made in the 2000s, where they remade pretty much anything, I actually do like the Hills of Eyes remake. I think it's better than the original. Never thought the original was much to write home about. I mean, I'm a big fan of, obviously, Wes Craven. Love his movies, love his mark on horror and movies in general, but I've always thought Hills of Eyes is pretty meh. So it's not like the remake is mind-blowing. I just think it's better because I just don't think...
I could agree with that, yeah.
Sure. So I might watch that kind of soon because I've got access to that. I think it's on Prime or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I watched that again maybe a year or so ago. I don't care for the remake too much either, but it is better than the original.
The original, not very much happens in it, really.
No. Very, very low budget film from what I remember.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's another one of those movies where like the plot could be done in like 15 minutes, but they just sort of stretch things out for the sake of tension. And maybe some people think it really works, but I mean, when you think about like the actual events of the original Hills Have Eyes, it's like that would take like 15 minutes, like 20 tops. But you know, they shot it in such a way to stretch things out and build tension, which I am often a fan of in movies. I just don't really think it works in that movie. I feel like very little happens, and they're just trying to pad it to make up for that. I'm like, maybe you should have written something a little longer. But anyway, no time to go off in all those directions. We'll wrap up here on The Driver. So yeah, this is just one of my favorite movies of the 70s for sure. It's always sort of back and forth with the Warriors in a tie for like my favorite Walter Hill movie, and they were made kind of back to back. I actually own the Warriors. I would love to own The Driver at some point. Really good movie. Just a super influential, as we said, you know, the obvious stuff like Tarantino and Edgar Wright doing Baby Driver, which I really love. And of course, Drive, the big obvious one, Nicholas Winding Refn, Ryan Gosling. Drive is kind of like this movie, but with, you know, a lot more glitz and neon thrown into it and music. And it's great. I really like Drive too. But I always have to tell people, you know, people that loved Drive back in the day, I was like, then go back and watch The Driver, because I'm sure you'll find things to like about that too. At least I hope so. I don't know. I know that our friend Pezel is a massive fan of Drive. I'm sure he's seen The Driver, but I don't actually know what his opinion on it is. I'd like to know. Because that was a movie that when that came out, like he was like dying to do an episode on, when he didn't used to do so many like he's branched out now, but I mean, this was like 10 years ago. You know, he did a episode on that back when he was, you know, more horror focused. Now I think he just does whatever. But anyway, yeah, so it's too bad that maybe the casting of Ryan O'Neal helped sink the movie, because I think he does a really great job in the role. I like his look. I like the way I mean, in some ways it doesn't seem like a very demanding role, considering he has very little dialogue and he's not supposed to convey that much emotion or anything like that. We talked about this a little when we were talking about the Samouraï, kind of the same thing. But I don't know. I thought he was really good. I think it would have been ruined if it was done by somebody really high profile and established, like Clint Eastwood or whatever. Like, you don't want the character that old. The character should be fairly young. I think that's a big part of his character. I think that's important. Bruce Dern is really a treat in this movie. He's one of those guys that's been around forever. He's pretty underrated, almost always sort of a supporting role. But yeah, really good in this movie. Just a nice contrast. The idea of like a sort of the quiet, stoic criminal with sort of a more arrogant, mouthy cop. It's kind of different, kind of a different dynamic than what we're used to seeing, I think. So yeah, as Walter Hill said, like I think he goes against convention in a few ways in this movie, making it kind of a stripped down, minimalistic movie. But I don't know, it's just a sort of fun watch. 90 minutes goes by.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jacob. I think
easy
so, yeah.
watch, fun watch. You know, this is like a dude movie in every aspect,
which is really Walter Hill's specialty, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
He's kind of like a dinosaur these days, I guess, because his movies are more like dude movies. They're, you know, when women are in them, they're not particularly important or developed or anything like that. And I don't think that's bad, because I mean, there's a time and a place for that, because there's movies, you know, again, it goes back to the argument of talking about like what a movie isn't or what a filmmaker isn't. That's not who he is. It's not what he does. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that's good. It's great when you have a director that's really flexible and really, you know, can do all sorts of different styles, but it's also good when a director kind of knows what they're good at and sticks with it. Because I think we've all seen directors kind of go too far outside their lane and not work out. Like when Michael Bay was like, I can make serious movies. I'm going to make a war epic about World War II, and everyone's going to respect me as an artist. And then, you know, Pearl Harbor became like a huge bomb and a joke. No pun intended, people.
And then he's like, no, I like money.
Yeah. That's yeah, I forgot. Money's what I like, not respect and artistic expression and reputation.
Like I think of Walter Hill movies, I think of like movies you can watch like on a Saturday with your dad or something, you know?
Right.
Like, you know, just something just really, you know, for the guys.
And a lot of those movies I realize aren't as good as The Driver in a way, because that's not really the type of movie we do on this show, because that's not really much to talk about. But I think The Driver has something about it that makes it worth, you know, delving into, even if it's not a particularly deep movie, even if it's not a particularly long or complicated movie. I just, maybe because of its it's extreme influence on the genre. Like you don't like do like driving and getaway and action type movies without getting a little something from the driver. I know he's all over the place in his quotes because Quentin Tarantino's favorite movie is whatever movie he happens to be talking about in that moment. But I know he like called like The Driver like the coolest movie ever or something. I mean, it's funny. The last week when we were talking about Quentin Tarantino, we we're both saying, we like a lot of his work and stuff, but a lot of the time, like, I'm not interested in hearing him talk, and he can be kind of annoying and insufferable. One thing I'll give him is his enthusiasm for film in general, because he's a fan of fucking everything. He'll just mention some like weird like Italian movie from like 1969 that he thought was amazing, and we're like, what? He likes to focus on the positive, so I'll give him credit for that. If he's some movie that like, it's just like a crappy movie, but maybe it has like one really good scene with like a gunfight or something, like he'll like key on that and be like, oh, I want to do something like that. So I give Tarantino credit for that. I like his enthusiasm for movies in general, and I like that he dwells on the positive. He's not about tearing people down or saying what sucked or what didn't work. He likes to point out stuff he thought was good, to the point where he's kind of lifting some of it verbatim in his movies. If you want another stylish 70s movie like this that we covered on the show, see our Lady Snowblood episode. Kill Bill is very, very much that, although again, other stuff thrown in, including this movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'll give Tarantino credit for that. I like that. I like his positivity. He likes to bring up what he thinks is cool and good. He's not about, criticizing things or over analyzing things and stuff.
He's all over the place with what he champions, like he'll champion like some sleaze over here and then like, some like high art film over here, which is fine. I'm kind of the same way, but he's always, I guess when you got to rip stuff off all the time, you got to like a range of things.
Yeah. But if you don't want it to be too obvious, it's good to find like more obscure stuff.
But as I've said before, at least he, brought a lot of stuff to American audiences that wouldn't have seen it otherwise. And, the early days of DVD, just by putting his name on it, Quentin Tarantino Presents, and having his relationship with the Weinsteins.
And it wasn't always just about taking stuff and not acknowledging it. Like, one thing that's really cool about the Kill Bill movies is not only does it pay tribute to like an old like kung fu movies and stuff like that, but he's got Gordon Liu in there. Right. That's fucking Gordon Liu. And on the Japanese side, he had Sonny Chiba. I mean, so he didn't just say, oh, I want to borrow from those movies. It's like, hey, if I can get those guys in roles, that'd be awesome. And he did. And, I don't think I didn't know who Sonny Chiba was before I saw Kill Bill. So, so I give him credit for that kind of stuff. But yeah, in general, I don't really like listening to him talk about stuff. But when he talks about stuff like that, I like that because it's just sort of a pure thing. He's just showing his love and appreciation for something. And I respect that. That's nice.
He's not hiding it either. Like, she's wearing, the suit, the Bruce Lee suit, obviously it's the same, he's, not going to say, he came up with that on his own. So, if anything, it's a fine line between like, ripping somebody off an homage. Right. So
yeah, we talk about that a lot. And kind of the same thing with Drive. There might be people that are such a big fan of this movie that they don't like Drive. Because they're like, the Drive is just, Drive is just like a pop song, neon, warmed over version of this movie with like sentimentality and emotion thrown in. They're not wrong. I just think it's still a good movie. But yeah, so.
There's one thing I could say about these three films since we're wrapping up the trilogy here, I guess you could say.
Yeah, we're gonna turn them into a playlist so you can just see them all, so you don't have to jump around to find them on our channel. We'll make that into a playlist alongside our series. It's not really a series, it's just something that we thought will help people find them if they want to compare and contrast.
But there's one thing I can say about the three is they are vastly different films.
Yeah.
So, they're each, unique in their own way, which I think is enough to where, that is homage,
Right.
So it's kind of like a nod, I love that film so much. I want to make something similar, but it's also very different.
People always say something like, when it comes down to it, there's only like 4 or 5 actual stories, right? And then they just repeat. Like it's like if you strip it all down to like the most basic elements, there's like 4 or 5 stories and you repeat. So it's like, yeah, these are 3 different movies telling kind of the same story, but there's enough there to make them different and stand out from each other, and I think it's cool. And it was the same thing when we mentioned the other Walter Hill movie, Last Man Standing, because you could trace that back. for a few dollars more, maybe a fistful of dollars, which you can trace back to Yojimbo. Again, same sort of basic plot and structure, but different execution. The first two are really great. I would not say that Last Man Standing is in any way in the same league as those two. But it is a movie I like, though. I do enjoy it, and I think it's kind of an underrated movie, both for Hill and Willis. But I get why people don't like it, because it is kind of bland, but I get something out of it. Anyway. But yeah, we'll put these three episodes together just so people can find them a little easier when they look at the channel. But yeah. So thanks so much for being with us, guys. The Driver, we're going to be going off in different directions now. I have a few thoughts on that. I won't say it here right now, because what we're going to do is maybe do one or two more, and then we will do a new actual series, which we haven't done in a few years, and we're going to nail down what that is. But we'll figure that out as we go. We have some stuff in mind. We've got some stuff to pick from. So we're going to figure that out over the next little while. But probably the next one or two will just sort of be standalone type episodes to give us some time, some breathing room to prepare for that. So as I always say, we will let you know as that develops. You can stay tuned to the Twitter channel, and we'll try our best to convey.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking with us. And we will see you next time.
Have a good night. See you guys. Bye. See you next time.